Thanks to all of you, I hit 30,000 subscribers on YouTube, and I'm absolutely floored at the progress the channel has had in the past couple months. And really, I have no one to thank but you. So I thought, what a better way to do so than answer a bunch of the questions you may have just come up with, burning questions you've had for a long time, and so on. So this is my 30K Q&A video. It'll probably be an hour, maybe longer. I'm committing to answer every question that I receive, which is just shy of 100, but some more duplicates. So if you want to see what those questions and answers are, stay tuned. That was supposed to be symbolic of me juggling your questions, but I'm not really juggling them. I'm going to answer all of them. A couple things up front. One, let's talk about subscriptions on YouTube. This is a video about 30,000 subscribers. I thought I'd showcase to you for the month of April. It's now the 27th. Out of all of you that watched, out of all 177,000 of you unique viewers who watched the channel, only 39.8% of you are subscribed. If less than half of the 60% who watched subscribed, I'd break 50,000 subscribers right now, which was my goal for my birthday in July. Only you have the power to make that happen. Second of all, if you like Q&A style videos, as a member of my Patreon, you can get access to monthly Q&As with me. If you don't get to ask your question this time, you missed the deadline, or you thought of something new, that is something that you can get access to at a certain tier. They also get access to all of these videos early. This Q&A that you're watching now, they've had it for several hours, exclusive to them for being on Patreon, and they may have already commented on it. So go ahead and check that out. That being said, let's dive into it. The way I tried to organize this was questions that I received the most up front, followed by questions from my patrons, and then followed by questions from everybody else. So, by and far, the number one question that I received was, how did I get into D&D? When did I get into D&D? How did I first get into D&D? And so on. What was your first character? Stuff like that. So, 2004, I was a senior in high school. I had wanted to play Dungeons & Dragons for a long time, but I had literally no concept of what an RPG was, of what D&D was, any of that. I didn't know what it was. I just know that it was something that I wanted to be a part of. I had been looking for a while, trying to figure out how to play. I had told my parents when I was like 13, I think, that I really wanted to try to play Dungeons & Dragons. And the only thing my mom had ever heard of about D&D was the Satanic Panic. She wasn't going to outlaw me from playing it, but that's literally the only thing she knew about it. So she was like, maybe don't play Dungeons & Dragons. So that was pretty much it. A friend of mine on the bus one year, maybe my junior year, showed me the second edition monster manual, and I like flipped through it, but it was a bunch of words and some cool pictures of monsters, and I was like, these look cool, but no concept. And he showed me a character sheet later on, and I still didn't know what that meant until a very good friend of mine who I'd known for 5-6 years at this point through middle school and high school, we were all sitting down at the lunch table, one day, and we're all just hanging around bullshitting like you do at school, and he came and he sat down at the table, and he just dropped, not this specific book, but he dropped a 3.5 Player's Handbook on the table and said, do you want to play Dungeons & Dragons? And I said, oh my god, yes, so much. And he said, cool, let's make you a character. Let's start now in lunch and meet me in the library 7th period, and we'll finish that character. So what did we do? We took out someone's graphing calculator who had a dice rolling app on their graphing calculator, because, right, this is when cell phones were flip phones. The lucky people had camera phones, right? So they had a die rolling app on there. So we rolled my stats on the die rolling app on the graphing calculator. It wasn't even an app, right? It was like a program, is what you called them back then. And then I skipped whatever my 7th period class was. I don't know what it was. And I went to the library to finish making my D&D characters. This was 2004, probably early spring of 2004. So this was 3.5. My character started off as a elf ranger druid, wood elf ranger druid. I only was a ranger wizard rather. I started off as a wizard because I wanted to be able to cast magic missile at the darkness, because that 8-bit version of that video was recent at that time. Then I started playing and realized that that wasn't really a great option. And I was kind of in a funky spot. So I decided to drop Wizard and go all Ranger. And then I actually decided to drop Ranger and go all Druid because it was the closest combination of the two classes. And we started at 6th level, and I had a blast playing that character for a while. I think we made it up to 10th level before the campaign just fell apart, as D&D campaigns do. So that is how I first got into D&D. I was hooked ever since, though I didn't play for a long time after that. We played that, and I didn't play again for maybe 5 or 6 years. I didn't play it all through college. I tried to get a game going with my friends. It never went anywhere. And then I started playing after college with some friends, and I started running a game, and 5th edition came out, and here we are today. Second most popular question, what is your favorite D&D race combo? What's your favorite class? What's your favorite D&D race slash subclass combo? So on. So if we're talking 5th edition, my favorite class is Paladin. Hands down, absolute favorite class. I think it's amazing. Race slash class combo, I'll probably be cheesy here and say half-elf Paladin. Half-elf is one of the strongest, if not, one of the strongest races in all of 5th edition for what you get and the ability score improvements that you get, as well as extra skills, and you have the variability with the variant races from Sword Coast Adventures Guide. So I like that a lot. But probably a good charisma class paired with Paladin, right? If you can swing a Yuan-Ti Paladin, go for that. You'll never be upset to have immunity to poison. I also like Tieflings a lot too, especially with the variant races that were introduced in Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes. A big fan of that. Favorite class is Paladin. If we're talking 3-5, not that I'm sure you are, that would be Ranger or Druid, and probably Elf. Although Human is usually the best option in 3-5 because of feats, so probably go with that. Okay, then I got third question, a lot about memorable stuff. I'm going to combine these together. What was my most memorable combat encounter, most memorable story moment whilst playing D&D, most memorable experience while being a PC, and so on. So let's start with the most memorable combat encounter in all of Dungeons & Dragons. I've had a lot of D&D combat encounters for a while. I'm going to say probably the most memorable encounter would be in my Curse of Strahd campaign, Season 1, which is available here on the YouTube if you want to go back and find it. Season 1, I guess spoiler alert, for my Campaign 1, Season 1 of Curse of Strahd, we had a TPK in Old Bone Grinder, the windmill in Curse of Strahd. Due to some supreme understanding and negligence of one of the players, we alerted everyone in that windmill that we were there, and they all came down, and we were level 3. They absolutely destroyed us. They wrecked us. We TPK'd, and it was really, really depressing when that happened. So, I mean, it's sad, but it is definitely one of the most memorable encounters I've ever had. Most memorable moment or story while playing D&D. I mean, I think, again, that's a pretty memorable moment. I'd say something I've done as a DM was probably in my original homebrew campaign. Here, again, on the channel, you can watch all 53 episodes of it we call it Know Your Role, but I introduced God, like Lord Ao, the overarching deity of all deities in the Forgotten Realms, and he took the form of Bob Ross. And I really, really like that analogy and that like kind of symbology of that, right? So like he's Bob Ross, right? So he's painting landscapes. They climbed a beanstalk from a bag of beans to a cloud, and on top of that cloud was a guy with an afro and a paint, and a paint stand and an easel and paintbrushes, and he was painting landscapes like Bob Ross does. But what he was painting, he painted into reality. So like if he painted a cloud would appear. If he painted a tree, a happy little tree, a tree would appear. And I thought, and I mean, I know there's lore behind how the Lord of all gods and Dungeons and Dragons takes place, at least in the Forgotten Realms. But I really liked the idea of him being this benevolent god, this Bob Ross figure, who just let things kind of happen as they happen. There are no mistakes, only happy accidents. And like, that's what he retired to do, was just paint landscapes and paint like features of the world into existence. And I thought that was a really cool concept. Most memorable moment of my D&D career as a player, as a DM, and as a YouTuber. Again, I kind of already told you about the concept of the TPK. about that really cool thing I did with as a DM. Oh, I also introduced a character in that same campaign that sounded exactly like Christopher Walken, and it blew the players away. They did not expect that. They didn't know I could even do a good Walken, so that was a good time. And as a YouTuber, I guess anytime anybody, I mean, here we're doing 30K, that's pretty cool. But anytime anybody ever encounters me somewhere and they tell me that they recognize who I am, and that hasn't happened very much. That's happened maybe 5 times since I've been doing D&D on YouTube. I guess probably one of the best moments would be I went to PAX East 2 years ago, and I sat down with a group of people at a Tier 1 Adventure League campaign. These people had never played D&D before in their life. They didn't even own dice. They sat down for a session before mine, the one that I joined them in. That was where they first played D&D. They didn't own dice. They didn't have character sheets. They had the pre-written characters that they had. And I sat down at this Tier 1 table with a level 4 character with a ton of hit points, with magic items and things that I'd acquired through Adventures League. And, like, I just pumped the brakes and let those guys just do their thing, right? Let them play it all out. But I did step in at a couple points where someone was going to, like, walk down the hallway without checking for traps. And I was like, maybe check for traps before we just go down this completely seemingly empty hallway. And they're like, yeah, okay. And they did check for traps. And, like, I had the most hit points. Even though I was a rogue, I would, like, go in front and take the hit for them because I could survive the hit. And I actually gave them, I was giving out orange D20s at the time, and I actually gave all those guys orange D20s. And this past year, I went to PAX East on a whim, and one of those guys from that table bumped into me, and he was like, excuse me, oh my God, Ted, I don't know if you remember me. And I was like, holy shit, yeah, man, I do. We played D&D together. And he's like, yeah, we played D&D that adventure. And he, like, was telling me, and his girlfriend was there, and he's like, I'm getting her into D&D. We're going to go play our first game. I'm so excited. And she's like, he's so excited. He always talks about you all the time. And he's like, and he, like, pulled open his bag. He's like, look, I still have the orange D20 that you gave me a year ago. It's so cool, man. It's always in my dice set. It rolls so well. Thank you so much. And that's probably the best moment, right? Like, I helped foster someone's love for D&D, that they're trying to bring other people into it. And, like, that most memorable moment in my career as a player or otherwise, like, I could be that guy's moment. And that just blows my mind. All right, number 4 is a lot about old stuff. What I want to bring back, right? Do I think prestige classes could work in 5e? Yes, I do. I made a video recently about the Unearthed Arcana about prestige classes. It came out recently. It was pretty well received, I'd say. I do think prestige classes have a purpose or a place in 5th edition. I do also accept a lot of your arguments on the comments saying, well, aren't prestige classes pretty much filled by subclasses? And yes, that was kind of the philosophy of 5th edition, that a subclass will take the place of a prestige class or certain other full classes. And I don't discount that. But I think the concept of additional progression or, you know, exclusivity progression, that kind of thing, to make you truly unique. I mean, maybe that's more of a backstory thing. I don't know. But I think there's a place for that, for you to sort of get the next level of customization and sort of narrowing your focus on what you do. And I think prestige classes could do it, but they need to be implemented correctly. And I think the reason they haven't been implemented is because of the situation that we have right now. You know, there's not a good version of it. They're just going to keep doing subclasses. What class or race from an older edition would you like to see brought into 5th edition? Class from 5th edition I'd like to see brought in would be the Dragon Shaman. I really, really like the Dragon Shaman class a lot. I also like the Dragon Fire Adept. There were a lot of good dragon-based things, as you can tell, from 3.5. But the Dragon Shaman I really liked. I've tried. There's actually a good homebrew version of it kicking around on the internet for 5th edition. But, like, I don't know if it could work as a subclass. I guess the closest thing it could be would be maybe like a cleric or a paladin. For those of you who are uninformed, the Dragon Shaman was someone who basically studied with a dragon and gained draconic powers. Not like a sorcerer where they're born with the powers. They kind of gained powers over time. And essentially what you got were auras. That was kind of your main thing. Similar to like a paladin aura, you gained auras. And your auras would let you do different things, right? It could be like an aura that gives you a bonus. I think the best way to probably do it in 5th edition would be to tie it to your proficiency bonus, potentially. That might be too much, but, you know, it starts off at 2, and then it goes at 4, and it starts off at a small radius, and it can get larger. And it might be like, if we were to do it in 5th edition terms, you get your aura gives a bonus equal to your proficiency bonus to perception checks and initiative rolls. And that's the aura you project, right? And then you can, as a bonus action, change your aura to something else. You might change it to, I think boosting your AC would be too much, but like letting you get a little bit of regeneration, letting you do a little bit of retributive damage, right? So like if someone hits you or your allies within your radius, they take 2 points, if your proficiency bonus is 2, of a given elemental type of damage. And it would be based on the type of dragon that you picked. You'd pick either metallic or chromatic, and it would give you something, right? It would say like, okay, if it's a red dragon, then it's going to deal fire damage. If it's a silver dragon, it's going to deal cold damage. Eventually, you'd get resistance to that damage. You might get a bonus to a skill. They also got like a lay on hands kind of a feature, so you'd probably give them something like that. They eventually got a breath weapon, which was sort of their main attack, so that would be something. They eventually got wings and different things like that. So that would be a cool class. I don't think that exists in 5th edition. It was purely a support class with a breath weapon as your main offensive move. And I think that could be an interesting concept in 5th edition. Again, like I said, it could be a cleric. I mean, I guess you could kind of make it a warlock, but that doesn't feel right to me with the invocations. And then obviously a paladin gets auras, so that kind of fits, but I thought it could be its own class. Race, I'd love to reintroduce the Dragonborn race from 3.5, the Dragonborn of Bahamut, where you get to undergo you start off as a base race, human, elf, halfling, dwarf, and then you undergo a transformation to become a Dragonborn. It wasn't a given race. It was something you devoted your life and your, everything to Bahamut, and then he granted you you basically encase yourself in a shell made out of precious metals, and you would arise from the shell as a Dragonborn of Bahamut, granted cool new powers and abilities and things. Because of that, you lose all your base race features pretty much, and then gain all these new features. And that was cool, because like you could be a Dragonborn dwarf, or a Dragonborn elf, or a Dragonborn tiefling, or whatever. I don't know if that would really fit in 5th edition terms, just the way classes and races and things work, but I think that would be cool. And do I think what prestige class would I want to bring in? I've also said before, I'd love to bring in Duskblade as well. What prestige class from 3.5 would I want to bring in, and why? That's tricky, because prestige classes are always, I'd say rather than bringing in prestige classes, I'd rather bring in like find a way to bring in the feats that build on multi-classing. There were a lot of feats in 3.5 that, like, if you were a multi-class like rogue ranger, let's say, like you take this feat, and it, like, as you progress levels in ranger, your levels for your sneak attack dice would count the same. Like, it would add the two classes together for purposes of sneak attack. I don't really think that'll fit too well in 5th edition, and I'm sure that's why we don't have those. I think it would be really cool to find a way to make that work. But I guess as a specific prestige class, nothing really jumps out at me off the top of my head. Assassin used to be a prestige class. I thought that was a pretty good one. Man, I don't know. Maybe like Sacred Fist. The idea of like a divine monk would be kind of cool. So I guess maybe that one. All right. It was only a matter of time. Question 5 is about this right here. For those of you who are uninformed or unaware or weren't sure, this is my Proton pack. I was a very, very big into cosplaying and doing costuming and prop building and things like that. And something I always wanted to have since I was a little kid in the 80s was my own Proton pack. I had the real Ghostbusters blue Proton pack, and all that, and I lost that over the years. And then I had always wanted to make one all throughout college, and I finally graduated college, and then I said, this is the year, this Halloween 2009, I'm going to make a Proton pack. And I made one, and it was awesome. Then this is Stacy here. By the way, I'll bring her a little closer so you can take a look. She's about the 7th or 8th Proton pack that I've made. I've made several over the year. I'll put an image on the screen. I actually had Proton packs at my wedding. I made one for each of my groomsmen and myself. so we could all have proton packs in the wedding. But people said, let's maybe show it in action. So I'll bring her a little closer here so you guys can get a close-up look at her. Okay, here we go. So, here she is. She is about as accurate as a proton pack can be. Ugh. She's a fiberglass resin. The shell, most of these pieces are either found pieces that were, what replicas of what they actually use, like these crank knobs and things are actual knobs. The same knobs used for the ones in the movies. All the different pieces. The lighting kits are made by a good friend of mine. Almost all of these external pieces you see here are made out of aluminum. You can't really see it in the video, but if I take the wand off here, there's also, I don't know if you guys can see, there's a scrolling bar light kind of on the arm there. There's a blinking light there. There's a red light that blinks in the back. There's that light in the front. And then, you can also, there's a button right here that if we press it, it'll throw lights in the front. It'll play the sound. And then, of course, we have there's a sound system in here where we can play the Ghostbusters theme song. I'm not going to do that because I don't want to get DMCA'd by Sony. But you get the point, right? So this is a custom proton pack that I made myself. The whole body of the gun arm and everything here, this is all aluminum. Probably weighs about 30-ish, 35 pounds or so. Like I said, when you've been making these for as long as I had been, you start to learn how to do it over time, so it all becomes second nature. But yeah, this is it. I watch a lot of stuff about how to grow your YouTube and your Twitch channel, and one thing they always said is do a green screen in the background if you don't have anything interesting, but if you have an interesting place where you stream or play games, put that in the background and make that part of it. And I was sitting here and I was going, man, a proton pack, not too many gamers and streamers and YouTubers have one of those, so why didn't I put it in the background? So I did. Number 6, what's my favorite character in D&D that I've played? A specific character this time, not race and character combo. Again, as I stated before, it's a half-elf paladin. I'd say my favorite character that I've played is probably, it's a tie, but the one that I got to play the most was Larenthier, my half-elf paladin. He was the first character I ever made in 5th edition. He also marked the first time I got to play D&D in about 6 years. And I made him for a Tyranny of Dragons campaign. And again, that was bereft with a whole bunch of issues because, we start playing the game before even the Monster Manual or the Dungeon Master's Guide were really out. And then there was a ton of errata to those books as well. But he was a half-elf paladin, Oath of the Ancients paladin. He was a servant of Mieliki. He used a sword and a shield. The DM let me choose my fine steed to be something better, so he actually had a brown bear named Bosco, who we summoned with fine steed. And again, this is before a lot of the new magic items, a lot of the new subclasses, a lot of that stuff was out. We only had the player's handbook and the monster manual to go off of. And yeah, we played that campaign for about 16 levels. At level 12, he multi-classed into Bard, and that was mostly because we needed some more versatility in the party, some more healing, and more like skills and stuff. So I did Lore Bard, so I could get the extra skills and the Bardic Inspiration and things to help boost the party a little bit. And then the only other character that I really, really liked in 5th edition was I had a cleric named Axton, who was a human fighter cleric combination. He was a Tempest cleric, Eldritch Knight fighter, and it started off as a fighter because I was going to be a life cleric to be the healing member of the party, and then it actually turns out that the party never took much damage, so we didn't really need a healer. So I switched to Tempest cleric, and then I already had the fighter levels, which was kind of pointless. But then I actually made a really cool combo with the Eldritch Knight mixed with Tempest cleric, and if you guys want in a future video, I can just do something about that if you're curious. But I really like the combination that he had. He had a really, really rich backstory. Unfortunately, I only got to play him for a little while, and not as long as I'd wanted to. But I really enjoyed that character. And then again, I guess 3-5. I only had the druid, right, the elf druid Aramil, and he was a blast. He had a giant crocodile animal companion named Bob. We used to wreck house. It was great. What's my favorite concept that I've seen or played? Haven't seen it or played it, but it's my idea of Glenn Frog from Chrono Trigger as a grung, pick a class that fits it character that I really, really, really want to play in a game, but I've yet to find one where anybody will invite me and I get the chance to play. All right, number 7 comes to us from Patreon. Hey, Ted, I'd love to hear what advice you would give to a new DM in fleshing out a homebrew pantheon, and how would you make it feel different than the standard Forgotten Realms / Greyhawk ones? So that's really tricky. First of all, I would say, as I say with a lot of things, steal everything. Look at all of the historical mythologies and things you can find from Greece, from Nordic, from Egyptian, Roman, Native American. Look at all the different deities that are out there for all of the different real world mythologies that exist, as well as the ones in games, whether it be from Forgotten Realms or Greyhawk or Eberron. Look into all of those, and what I would say to start is find the kind of common themes that you see in all of those. Right, so you're probably going to have your kind of king or queen of the gods, right? You're going to have war, you're going to have love, you're going to have beauty, wisdom, that kind of thing. Pick the kind of key ones that you think you definitely need to have. Because if you look at a lot of the historical ones, a lot of those deities have multiple profiles within what they cover, right? So they might be like beauty, wisdom, tactical planning, potentially war, battle, whatever. It can all be like rolled into one. So I would say kind of choose what you think are the key profiles you want to cover in the Pantheon, and then decide, like, maybe in your one, like love and war is this, like, how you're going to combine them or like mix and match to make it unique. Maybe your deity is love and war. That's what that one deity covers, which is usually the opposite, right? Usually love and war deities are opposite. They either butt heads or they have other things like Aphrodite and Ares, right, have like a relationship, even though they're not like they're brother and sister, I think. And then there's also Hephaestus who's thrown in there, right? So you can ignore all that kind of stuff or build that up if you want, but maybe do that, kind of take profiles of different deities that don't really make sense to combine together, and then combine them together and then come up with an interesting reason why. Also, don't feel like you have to come up with your own pantheon, right? In my homebrew game, I pretty much am using the Forgotten Realms Pantheon with a couple of adjustments because I like the Forgotten Realms Pantheon and my players know it well, so I can use it. So what I find is find a Pantheon that you like and then add deities to it, or add, lesser deities or things like that to it, so that it has some uniqueness, but it's not 100% that group. Or, look at video games, right? If there's a good video game you like that has a good deity system that your players maybe don't know, if you're trying to, like, don't be afraid to show your players, like, hey, I copied this from something else, but that may be a cool way to instill, unique gods into your game. This next one, number 8, also comes from Patreon, but we also had similar questions to it. If I was given the power to choose a topic for a book for Wizards to develop / print, what would it be? If you could publish your own book, and this is another separate question, if you publish your own book like Matt Mercer, what would it be about? What content would it have in it? It would not be a setting of any kind. It would be it would be a player book. It would be subclasses. It would be equipment, armor, weapons, new unique stuff like that, like things we talked about in Wildmount, like the new unique mundane items. It would be new feats. It would be racial feats for all the races that got shafted and didn't get their own. It would be new spells. And it would be alternative class features or optional things that you could choose to employ if you wanted, right? So like the alternative class features on Unearthed Arcana that we saw, a concept like that, a book of things for the players to use to expand upon the current options you have in 5th edition. The fact that I respect Wizards' choice to make such a slow release schedule by not overloading us with books and having people spend a ton of money on books, but I do think it's still too slow. I think even with all the options out there, not including homebrew, right, because that's a whole nother animal, but with the with the published options from Wizards of the Coast, I think that they start to get played out. And I don't know about all of you, but when I sit down at a table with 3 or 4 other people, and if somebody at the table, like, so let's say I'm going to play a half-elf paladin, and my buddy's playing a wood elf rogue, when my next character comes around, I'm not like, I don't really know if I want to play a wood elf rogue because I just played through a campaign with a wood elf rogue. Maybe I want to be something different. And that's kind of the situation that I find myself in a lot of the time when I run a game for someone and they play a certain type of character, or I play in a game with other players. I usually want to try to make my next character something unique, especially if I'm playing with the same group of people that no one has ever seen before. That's not always the case for everybody. They're like, oh man, you had a lot of fun playing that wood elf rogue. I'm going to do that too. I like to try to be unique in a lot of ways, and that may be why I have a hard time finding new interesting builds to play, hence the idea for the Grung fighter or paladin, whatever it is, because I haven't had an opportunity to see anybody play that. Right, we're back to YouTube for number 9. Hi, I really like your videos, and I was wondering why you weren't doing any builds for 5e. And then a follow-up, just curious, would you ever considering doing build videos for new players or inexperienced players? Not necessarily pop culture builds, but perhaps generalized builds like the Dark Knight, Magic Slinger, etc. That's a good point. I didn't really know there was a huge interest for me to do that. I know there's a lot of other YouTubers who do build videos. I guess maybe this is just like a good thing, right? The channel's growing. People are asking for other things. Again, there's been a couple of thoughts about it, and I've seen some interest on Patreon saying that same thing. They'd love to see me do build videos. For those of you who don't know, I do have like a 33 video series on here called It Builds Character. It was a stream series that I used to do where I would stream building characters in 5th edition, and I would take people's suggestions for pop culture characters and try to make them as 5th edition characters. And I did a fair few from all over the place, right? From Shrek to Trevor Belmont to Link to Ganon to Darth Vader, right? All over the place. I did a bunch of different things that people asked, and I just fell off the bandwagon with doing that, and I have a lot more that I still planned to do and never got around to. But if you're asking for build videos like how would I build a bard, or like what's a cool concept for like, oh, here's the concept for, you know, the College of Whispers bard, or like the steal your name and steal your identity character or whatever. I don't know if that's exactly what you're asking for. If so, yeah, I guess I could do that. I just didn't know that there was any interest in hearing that from me. I tend to take things to a pretty analytical standpoint, as I'm sure all of you know, and I kind of dive down into the weeds pretty in depth on these things. So I would probably look at it a lot from that perspective. But if that's something someone's interested in, I can definitely give it a shot. I also thought about maybe doing like a class series videos, right? Like, so you want to play a barbarian, or like, so you want to play a bard, and like give you a high level stuff about that. I don't know if there's really a market for that at this point in 5th edition, but I mean, maybe. Sound off in the comments if you're really interested in that, and maybe I'll look into doing that for the future. Number 10, a couple questions on this. Do you think there should be a 5.5e version of D&D in the next couple years to refresh the brand slightly and minor tweaks to the core classes and wrap up some more race/species, that kind of a thing? And then also, what are your thoughts on a looming 6th edition? So I don't think there should be a 6th edition at all. I think that's kind of, I think we're not there yet. I think 5th edition is exceptionally popular. It's the most popular version of D&D that's ever been around. It's very popular in pop culture. There are entire entertainment franchises like Critical Role that are built solely on 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. I think it would Wizards would be shooting themselves in the foot a lot if they decided to go to a wholly new edition. And part of Wizards' philosophy is they'll only make a new edition when they think that it's needed. And I don't think a 6th edition is needed, because as we saw, 3.5 was one way, right? 4th edition was drastically another way. And then 5th edition kind of went back more towards the 3.5 area, but it was a little bit more new player friendly and not as crazy intensive with math and choices and things like that. I don't think we're at a point, and I really don't know what a 6th edition Dungeons and Dragons would look like. I actually am going to say that I don't think a 5.5 edition would be bad. I think that would be something that I would be more interested in seeing. If you look at the differences between 3.0 and 3.5, they're there, but they're not crazy. 3.0 is basically like consider like a beta release, if you will, and then 3.5 was the final finished product. Then they kind of, I mean, they did make a fair amount of books for 3.0. If you don't know, there's a fair amount of stuff before they switched to 3.5. I do really like 3.5, and I thought it did a good job of clearing up some of the issues that 3.0 had. So I wouldn't have a problem with a 5.5e. Also, if you look back, the way things worked with between 3 and 3.5, you could pretty easily use a lot of the stuff that was for 3.0 in 3.5 with minimal tweaking, and it would work pretty much just the same. The only time it got a little weird is if like a prestige class was printed in 3.0 and then sort of reprinted in 3.5, and there was a big change between the two. That could potentially be an issue. But I would be okay with the 5.5. The other side of it is there's not that many books, right? The adventure modules that they've written really aren't. It shouldn't really matter if it's a 5.5 and things are slightly more refined mechanics wise. The adventures you really shouldn't have to reprint. The storylines and what they're doing there is probably the same. Maybe you need to reprint the stat blocks of the monsters if you changed anything unique. But I feel like that would be a smart thing to release, like a 5.5 errata for the adventures. But as far as actual books that you'd need to rebuy, in theory, would just be Player's Handbook, Dungeon Master Guide, Monster Manual, and then it's really just Volo's, Mordenkainen's, Xanathar's, and the Sword Coast Adventures Guide. That's not a ton of books, right? I guess Wildmount maybe, right? But a lot of people have said like you kind of see the transition, like if you look at the the Echo Knight Fighter and compare the Echo Knight Fighter to the Eldritch Knight, or the Echo Knight Fighter and compare it to the Champion Fighter. The Echo Knight Fighter can do a lot of really cool stuff and unique stuff that the other ones couldn't do. And I mean, it's the same thing with, looking at newer, like the new Rangers all have an extra spell per level, but the old Rangers don't. It seems like, I'm not going to necessarily call it power creep, but some people are. Things have gotten better, classes have become more refined, the way an artificer controls their pet versus how a ranger, Beastmaster Ranger, controls theirs. Things have gotten better and more advanced, and it's just like, well, you kind of left some of the stuff lagging behind. Maybe making a 5.5 to bring everything and level set everything at one level wouldn't be a bad idea. I don't have any problem rebuying books. Me personally, and I would be fine with it, but I could definitely understand why a lot of people wouldn't be. But I'm curious, what do you think? 5.5e, yes, no? Let me know. Number 11, what's your opinion on the name Greg? I don't know. It's fine. I have a couple friends named Greg. They're good people. I like them. Gregory, also a good name. I did know a kid named Gregory in elementary school. He was kind of weird. I really like Gregor, though, the kind of combination of the two. I'm a bigger fan of that one. Can I do a top 10 races? I think it would be really cool. Yes, as a matter of fact, it will be coming out soon. I've already figured out what my top 10 races are. I'm just waiting on something very special before I'm able to do that. So stay tuned. If I were to design a new class for D&D, what archetype/role would I like to see added? The only thing I can think of that really doesn't exist is a true summoner class. I know we do have the Shepherd Druid, and it does definitely have that vibe, but this is the idea of like someone that most of the work is done by the summoned creatures, and that I think would need to be reflected in the class. Like the character would be relatively weak, right? Like a D6 hit die, something pretty squishy, but they would defend themselves more with the creatures that they summon, and you've seen this done in a bunch of different editions of not editions of D&D, but like in different video games and things, right? That where a summoner, like they gain their power from the creatures that they summon, that kind of a thing. Or maybe like a true necromancer, right? Like they are really good at summoning undead. Like the necromancy wizard is not the best. So a better true necromancer, I guess, would be the kind of things, the archetypes that I'd like to see. Also maybe like a trapper, someone who sets traps. That could probably be like a rogue archetype though, I guess. Do I think flat-footed /touch AC should make a comeback? I'm going to say no. because a lot of people, it makes don't get me wrong, the concept of flat-footed and touch AC make a lot of sense. For those of you who don't understand, and I'm not going to go 100% into the nuances of this because there's a lot of different bonuses of what could get added, but D&D 3 and 3.5 and maybe even before had there was 3 different armor classes. You had your armor class, your flat-footed armor class, and your touch armor class. And the concept behind that is if you were flat-footed, aka surprised, you would not add things like your dexterity or any other dodge-based bonuses to your armor class. The thought process being your dexterity means like your ability to slip out of the way of an attack. So if I catch you by surprise, you shouldn't be able to slip out of the way of that attack because you don't know what's coming. So for example, let's do something. So you have armor and a shield, and your dex bonus is 5. We'll say altogether you have an AC of 20 in 5th edition. And I caught you surprised, you would subtract 5 from that AC because you wouldn't be adding your dexterity bonus. Like, if I'm trying to hit you, I still have to get past your shield, I still have to get past your armor to actually damage you, but you're not adding your dexterity bonus as that's your ability to slip out of the way. The other concept of that is the touch AC, which is going to kind of be the inverse of that. It doesn't add your armor class, it doesn't add your armor, your shields. It's only your ability to slip out of the way, because I'm not trying to hit you, I'm just trying to touch you. And the concept behind that is a lot of spells, right? So if I want to hit you with Shocking Grasp, I don't necessarily need to find like a weakness in your armor. I just need to physically put my hand on you because I'm going to send electricity through your body. The way that's handled in 5th edition, again with Shocking Grasp specifically, is if you're wearing metal armor, then it's going to give you advantage on the attack roll. But even if you're wearing leather armor and you have big, thick leather armor that's like 15 layers thick that gives you a plus 10 to AC, I'm not trying to get through that. I'm just trying to touch you to send the electricity through your body. So like things like a dragon, for example, in 3.5 would have a very low touch AC because most of the dragon's armor was their natural thick hide. I wasn't trying to find a weakness in their hide. I was just trying to touch them to inflict the spell to them. So that was the concept of that. And if you think about it, it kind of makes sense in 5th edition. If I'm grappling you and I have you held and I want to literally Shocking Grasp you, I'm already holding you. I can miss with my Shocking Grasp when I have you held in my hands. Like, that's a thing that can happen in 5th edition. And in 3.5, that would have been different because I had you grappled and you would have a different AC to represent me just grabbing a hold and touching you. That being said, as you could see the complications of that, and there were different feats and abilities and things that could let you get around and add different bonuses to different things because of that. And I'm sure that's why they threw that all out and just went with a straight AC because it's easier to calculate. Though there's some questions coming up that I'll get to that kind of deal with this. And I do think there are certain ways it could be implemented, but I think for the most part, it probably won't be done. Your channel is so awesome. You give so much helpful information in your videos, and you're always entertaining. Well, thank you. Why is your channel so awesome is the question. That's kind of a flattering question. I'm not really sure how to answer that. But I guess I'll tell you, I think it's because I think it's because I don't do D&D. I don't do YouTube as my main source of income. Like, I have a real job that I work 9 to 5, sometimes longer, consistently. I'm an essential worker, so I'm doing work all the time. This has just always been like a side thing for me to have fun with and share my opinion with folks on the internet. And I think because of that, I have this isn't my only like means of income. I have less like need to pander, and like I can be sincere with you and tell it to you straight, because this isn't what I'm relying on to bring income in to feed my family. So I think that's why. I think I try to present things as like an everyman's take to D&D. I don't try to come off as like the expert, the all-knowing person, who's got all the connections and does all this thing. I'm just Joe Everyman who loves Dungeons and Dragons and is not afraid to tell you I think something sucks or I think it's great, regardless of whether you feel like that. I just want to tell it like it is, or at least how I see it anyway. Will I do a video with my son? He's 3, so maybe. I'm not really sure what kind of video you're asking about. like if you're asking for me to do like a D&D video with him, he's 3. So he's not really going to sit still and like play Dungeons and Dragons with me. He likes the concept. He loves the minis. He loves rolling dice and stuff like that. But, you know, we know some numbers, right? You know, we can look at the thing and pick out some numbers and we can write our name and things like that. I don't know if you want me like a vlog style video, like, hey, here's me and one of my sons. By the way, I do have 2. I have one who's 3 years old and one who's 7 months. Actually, if you watch my unboxing of this mini video that's on my channel, you'll see both of them. My now 3-year-old is in it with me unboxing this, and my son at the time my other son was 1 week old, and we actually put him up to it to compare the size of this mini to a 1 week old child. So if you go back and watch that video, I guess I can link that in the description. The walking statue of Waterdeep unboxing, they're both in that. But if you really want to make a video, want me to make a video with my son, I need to know more about what you actually want me to make the video about. Fixing Beastmaster Hunter, ? I don't know if that's supposed to be fixing Beastmaster Ranger or fixing the Beastmaster and the Hunter Ranger. Yes, it's coming. I have a whole fix coming to the Ranger. I'm working on playtesting that now before I make the video. Coming soon. Please bear with me. What do I think about handing out magic items at character creation? I don't have any problems with it. I think it's a cool concept. I think it depends on the game and the what you're planning on doing with it. It depends on definitely how high you're starting, right? If you're starting at like 5th level, I think you should definitely, in my mind, be giving somebody at least an uncommon magic item, if not more. Starting at level 1, the Xanathar's Guide and a bunch of other sources have had really interesting common magic items. I think it's definitely cool to give people common magic items at level 1, for sure. But I also let it go based on backstory and things. So I like to use trinkets a lot in my games. If you've watched any one of my live streams, you'll definitely see that people donate trinkets constantly. It's just a function that people can do, not monetarily based, just with the chat currency. And I do enjoy that. And sometimes I let those trinkets that they roll before they start determine, like give them as a magic item, right? I'll be running a game coming up soon, starting at level 2, and I gave everybody an uncommon magic item to start. And I think that that's fine, right? I'm not really afraid of handing out magic items in my games, so giving them out at the start is fun. And then it all comes down to, do you let your players pick the magic item, or do you pick it for them based on the story? I don't know. That really, again, it goes scenario to scenario. If this player starting with like this cool magic item that they came up with, or let them create their own, right? Is like a functional part that they really like about their character, then I think that could be really fun, because it might build another level of roleplay. It'll get the players more invested. As long as it's not just like a cash grab to like, oh my god, if I get this, then my character will be amazing. But if it's got a good, reasoning behind it, backstory, and like they can explain it to me well, I'm all for it. What do I think of an item that grants spellcasters the ability to maintain concentration on 2 spells? What limitations would you give the item so that it's not too OP? What rarity would you give it? What sort of item would it be? Personally, I'm thinking of a brain in the jar type thing, depending on the world setting. So you got to be careful, right? Concentration is a very important mechanic they added in 5th edition because they wanted to keep things, limited in how many spells you could keep up. That being said, I have done that before. Let me see, I think I have it in this notebook right here. It was a magic item that I gave to one of my players. It was like a reliquary-based holy symbol that they got that kind of leveled up with them. I'm also a big fan of the idea of items that level up with the players. Where is it? It's in here somewhere, I promise. But what I did with this is I didn't let it like maintain concentration on 2 spells. I had, when you cast a spell that no, I'm sorry, here it is. When casting a concentration spell with 1 up already, the previous one remains for 2 rounds and then it goes away. The problem with that is that was a big concept of remembering what spell, like how many rounds had gone by before that spell goes off. And more often than not, my players try to use it to cheese, like as a cleric, cast Spirit Guardians, and then cast Spirit Guardians again. So the previous Spirit Guardians stayed up for 2 rounds, and the new Spirit Guardians stayed up, and they'd cast it at different levels, so there was more of a reason as to why one would stay. And then you have double Spirit Guardians, and then it's a bad day, everybody dies. I think you definitely need to have the option, like, if they fail the concentration check, they lose both spells. So that's definitely something. Rarity, I'd say it's probably got to be very rare to maintain concentration on 2 spells. If it's always on, I might limit how long you can do it. I might say you can maintain concentration on spells up to your constitution modifier, right? Because a constitution save is what it is for concentration. So let's say you have a constitution of 16. With this item, you can maintain concentration on 2 spells for a number of rounds equal to your constitution modifier. So in that way, 3 rounds. And then I might say at the end of that combat, you gain a level of exhaustion because it was so taxing for you to maintain 2 spells that are concentration. That's the downside, right? You can maintain it for a number of rounds equal to constitution. If you lose concentration on 1 spell, you lose it on both. And maybe tack on exhaustion. You could add exhaustion like as soon as the spells end, you gain a level of exhaustion, but that could further hamper combat. So you could make it at the end of combat, or you could make it happen right there. I think those would be 2 good ways to do so. What kind of item would it be? Brain in a jar works. I think that definitely fits for like a good sorcerer, wizard, warlock. But don't forget, you got to think about the other spellcasters, right? Bard, cleric, druid, and so on. For a bard, it could be a cool like instrument that plays itself, right? So you have like a lute on and like you start strumming it, right? And when you're playing your first song, your first spell, and then you let go, and maybe like spectral hands keep playing the instrument while you're casting your new spell. So it's maintaining concentration by the spectral instrument playing or something like that. For the cleric, like I said, I did a reliquary holy symbol, so it's a holy symbol that has like a piece of a saint inside it, and that could maintain the concentration for you. Maybe for the druid, it could be like a creature or an animal or something that does the bird maintains the concentration for them, or some sort of something like that. I think it's a cool concept. I think it could definitely work. You just got to be careful how you implement it. How do you feel about having a big bad evil guy be a disease or force of ancient evil that was released? I was thinking of having the party search for a cure or try and spend time locating the source to seal it up. I think that that's amazing. That's a great concept for an enemy. Like the big villain of the game is not an actual person. It's a disease. I mean, obviously that's kind of relevant in the world today where we are at right now. But that's an interesting concept because you can't really point a finger at like, this person is evil, they need to die. Like, maybe there was a person who released the thing into the world. Maybe they're evil and they did it on purpose. Maybe they were an unsuspecting kid who, like, stumbled into the wrong place and released it. I don't know. But the concept of the villain almost being formless is very cool. You're trying to beat a disease or some sort of ancient force. That's really cool. Yeah, I think the idea of searching for a cure, maybe there was some ancient, maybe they can find, like, a god or maybe like some sort of shroud or something like the golden fleece, right, from Greek mythology, where you can lay that on somebody and it heals them. Maybe they can try to find that and then like take it and alter it and put it into some sort of device to like spread it across the world. That could be really cool. I would look up the Malady Codex and the Malady Chronicles on the DM's Guild. They have a lot of good stuff made by medical students doing stuff with diseases. And I think they even have a campaign based around disease, so that could be very interesting. Do you like the idea of Gestalt characters or prestige classes, or do you think they could fit into 5e? I already mentioned prestige classes. Gestalt characters, I don't think so. That's the idea of you being 2 classes basically at the same time. I always saw people talking about it in 3.5. I never played in a game with it myself. It could be interesting. I don't really think that has a spot in 5th edition, but I do think prestige classes, as I mentioned before, could potentially fit. How would I fix chases for 5e? So there's a video I did, and there's a section in the Dungeon Master's Guide about chases and how to run a chase encounter. I think the biggest way to fix chases is to have a bunch of tables for chases in different environments. I think you need like a table with like chase complications of at least a percentile number, so at least 50, right? It could be 1 and 2 is 1, 2 and 3, or sorry, 1 and 2, 3 and 4. So you have at least 50 different chase options, and you build a bunch of different tables for different locations, right? An urban chase setting, a forest chase setting, an underwater chase setting, build out different ones. So that way people have a bunch of options rather than trying to make up their own. You have a set table for those, and then that should really help you narrow it down. I don't really know how I would fix it beyond that. I think that's probably the best bet. Do you have an opinion on the HP mechanic in D&D? Doesn't it interfere with the narrative sometimes, like assassinations? You're trying to cut someone's throat in their sleep with a successful stealth check, call for a roll, not limited to rogues. Yeah, this is something I definitely brought up when I was running my homebrew campaign, and I never actually nailed it down. But it bothered me to no end, and it still does. And there's a difference of narrative versus hit points, and like the players. So what they're talking about is like if I, in theory, me, the player, run up to somebody and I grab them and I put a knife to their throat, right? And I slit their throat, I might have advantage on the roll. It might be an automatic critical hit. But unless I'm a character that can do a butt ton of damage, I might not kill them. Like, I slit their throat, sure, but they don't die. And, like, that's the concept of, like, narrative versus mechanics and the idea of HP. So, like, I could do that, like, grab the villain and try to slit their throat so it's quiet and no one knows, but, like, they could still survive. And then it's like, well, if that was the ultimate villain and I did that and they just died immediately, does that kind of ruin the climacticness of the combat? And that's the concept of HP. Like, if you have a ton of HP, you can survive even the most crazy sneak attack. And that's like, I mean, if you could think about like how different like a show like Game of Thrones would be, if you could like get stabbed or poisoned or any of that kind of stuff, and you have enough HP to just tank through it so it doesn't actually affect you. It kind of ruins the entirety of that narrative. So I actually had approached this with my players, and I said, I really don't like this. I also brought up that I don't like that sleeping 8 hours in Dungeons & Dragons heals you 100% to full hit points. I thought that kind of seems a little funky. Like, you could be basically on the verge of death multiple times in a day, and an 8-hour nap brings you back to full hit points like you were never hurt at all. But I had toyed with the idea of like a surprised or something helpless, like a condition, essentially, where like I never actually fully rolled it out. I may do it in my next campaign that I run, but like call it like helpless. Like I said, helpless is a condition. If you find yourself in X scenario, you are considered helpless, and then like it cuts your HP in half or something like that, or your HP is half of what it normally is, or it's a fifth of what it should be, whatever it is. So that way it's more likely that you will kill them. It still doesn't necessarily get around the purposes that you had brought up, where like they could potentially, even if you cut their HP in half, you could still roll poorly and they could die. Like, so you would say like your HP is in half and the next melee attack against them that hits is a critical hit, right, for a helpless condition. Something like that. And we never really landed on anything. Because the idea is, like, for narrative, like, okay, if it doesn't really impact anything, I slit the guy's throat. Or, like, the villain slits the NPC's throat that the party wasn't, like, supposed to save, and then they die. But then the players have healing magic, so they try to heal the person who died. And, like, in theory, that person didn't make death saving throws, but they're an NPC, so they don't get them, but healing should still work. But then, like, every time I've done that, the player's like, no, I'm okay with that. But I was like, but you wouldn't be okay if I did that to you. If I, as the NPC villain, grabbed your character and slit your throat, and you just died, you would be very upset that I did that to you. You would say, well, how come I didn't get to roll death saving throws? How come I didn't get to use my HP or anything like that? And that's the kind of the concept of the problem, right? I could do it to an NPC and you're fine with it. Or you could do it to an NPC and you're fine with it, but when it gets turned back on you, you don't like it. So HP, I think it's a mechanic. It has to exist, but there has to be, I think, a way to mitigate what you're talking about. And maybe it is that helpless condition, and maybe we can workshop that further to become something. What are your thoughts on Crawford's design philosophy? Boy, that ain't a loaded question. I don't know what is. I don't know. Like I said, I met with the guy in person at D&D Live last year, and I'm still blown away at the concept of, you know, how are you going to handle that a Battlesmith Artificer is so much stronger and better than the way a Beastmaster Ranger handles their pets? And the discussion was, we're not going to let anything that we did in the past hamper or restrict our design philosophy for the future. And I get that. You're moving forward. You're constantly, you know, going into new directions, and I respect that. But I think if you do that and make something fundamentally better, you need to go back. You need to 100% go back and update that. You guys can think about that in like an MMO or like a Dota style game where like they made a new champion that's way better and is a better version of this old champion, and then they just leave that old champion alone and don't fix their abilities. No one's ever gonna play that. They're only gonna play the new one. Did you hear me, Wizards? No one's gonna go back and play the old one. They're only gonna play the new one because it's better. You need to go back and fix what you... I mean, regardless of whether or not you think it needs to be fixed, if you're gonna make all new Ranger subclasses have an extra spell per level, why not just make an errata that adds it to the original? I don't see the downside to that. So as far as his philosophy goes, unless you're talking about some other specific instance of his philosophy, that's my issue. Is if you're gonna... I love that you're blazing trails and you're moving forward and doing cool, unique stuff. That's amazing. Keep doing that. But don't forget where you started and fix and make sure that the things that you did create are in line with the things that you're going to be making in the future. That's how I think all design should be. And you know what? Errata could be the way to do it. Maybe this is what we were talking about with 5.5e. They fix all that, and that's how we go forward. How do you feel about the Magic versus Martial difference? I think I'm personally insulted by it, but I just want to know how you feel and want to see if you have any ideas on how to make the split more of a line in the sand and less of a cliff face to Magic superiority and commonality. So this is the concept, I assume, and this was a big deal in early 5th edition of like, could any martial class beat the Druid? Right, a high-level Moon Druid, no one could beat it because you could just wild shape every turn and have unlimited hit point pool and never die. The difference between Martial and Magic, it's tricky, right? You know, like if you're a high-level Cleric, right, or a high-level Druid, you're going to be hard to, like, the fighter may potentially pale in comparison to what you could do. You can AoE, you could do all sorts of stuff. You know, I don't really feel a huge difference because my favorite class is Paladin, and it's sort of a mix of Magic and Martial. And I also, not to like toot my own horn or anything, but I tend to roll pretty high. So I tend to crit more often than not, which makes martial characters more interesting. Because I actually prefer attacking-based things in D&D 5e. Because I feel like if I fail, it's my fault. Like if I roll to attack and I miss, that's my fault. Whereas I feel like I have no control if the DM rolls behind the screen or rolls to succeed on my saving throw and they succeed. Like, I don't know if they actually succeeded, or I don't, like, my save should have been higher. Like, I can't change that, but I can, you know, the dice in my hand make me feel like I'm in control. So I recognize that there is a disparity between Magic and Martial, but I don't think it's as bad as people thought it was. And you know what? You could play an all Martial party or an all Magic party, and I think you'd have a good time either way. But every game I've played has had a mixture of both, and I don't really think one person really outclassed everybody else in any major way. Do you think a class centered around learning monster abilities is viable and can be made balanced with other classes? I've been trying to homebrew such a class with my group with little success. I would enjoy hearing your thoughts and ideas on this. So I'm not sure it needs to be its own class per se. But I guess you're talking about some sort of like monster hunter type person where you're able to discern abilities from different creatures, and maybe you're able to like imbibe or use them sort of like a Witcher in a way. I mean, there is the new Blood Hunter, which kind of touches on that a little bit. This could kind of feels like it could be a ranger class, but again, it's still a ranger, so I'm not sure. Maybe a druid subclass where they focus on, you know, learning abilities from creatures and things. I'm not really sure. I do think it could be viable, and I think it could be balanced. I'm not sure. The tricky part is, right, they made 5th edition so broad spectrum with all of the classes and the way the subclasses work to really not need new classes. That was kind of their whole philosophy, right? You've got things that pretty much cover a broad spectrum of things, and we do see that like certain ones have fallen behind. Like the Ranger is obviously a little bit weaker. Sorcerer is a little bit weaker. Warlock's kind of in a funky spot. Where other kind of more generic classes are pretty solid. You know, Artificer is new. So, that's something different. But it took them several years to release a new base class. And then we know they canned the Mystic entirely as a psionic class, so that's gone forever. So I don't know if we're gonna see any more base classes introduced in 5th edition. So I like the concept of someone being able to like graft monster bits to them to do something cool. I'm not really sure. I do think, like I said, I think it could fit. I don't know if it could be a standalone class. I don't know if it could be interesting or unique enough to be a standalone class, but it could definitely be a subclass. I'd love to see your notes on what you've come up with so far, though. Maybe we can workshop it further. Would you be interested in more Dunamancy spell-based subclasses, rather? And if so, for which classes? I personally would love a cleric one. Yeah, I would be down for that. The concept of... See, like, Dunamancy could have been a prestige class. I feel like you could have handled the Dunamancy that way. I told you I love paladins. I'd love to see a Dunamancy paladin. Because they do have spells. What would be really wonky would be a Dunamancy Barbarian, because they don't actually have any spell casting, so that would be really interesting for me to see. Or a Dunamancy Monk would be really cool. I think that could be really neat. But Paladin and Cleric would be the ones I want the most. But I love the idea of making it a martial-based Dunamancy character, because I don't know how you'd handle that. Would you want a true/proper summoner class/subclass, and if subclass, what class other than wizard? Yes, I don't think you could do it. You might be able to do it as a warlock. That would be kind of weird. I mean, you kind of have like the Hexblade can summon the Spectre. I think it'd be really cool for it to be a bard, actually, a summoner class as a bard, where you're like summoning things with your music. I think that would be really, like, not even necessarily going down the Pied Piper route, but that could be really cool. And then I guess Sorcerer would probably be the other one. But Sorcerer is really so limited in their spell selection, it could be a little tricky. But Warlock, like I said, could work, but I think Bard would be my ideal one for that. What's your understanding of balance in D&D? I believe it's important, but player-made content is also an assumed part of the game and intrinsically throws balance out of whack. P.S. I also count the DM as a player. So, I'm trying to make sure I understand this question completely. What is balance in D&D? My understanding. So, I think realistically, balance in Dungeons and Dragons is as long as everybody's having a good time, then I consider it balance, right? The way you want to work it out is you don't want things to be so impossible that the players can never succeed, right? You don't want the checks to be so high, the things they need to do are impossible. You want your players to succeed. You want them to be able to do the thing that they want to do or you want them to do. You just don't want to make it too easy, right? Like if you want to have a heist, don't have there be one guard who takes breaks every 2 minutes and sleeps the whole time he's on break, right? You want your heist to be difficult and interesting. You want to have multiple guards, multiple angles, security measures, multiple doors, levels of security, right? You want to have that. You want it to be interesting and fun for the players, but you don't want it to be so overbearingly difficult that they can't actually do what they want to do. Same thing is, if every combat that your players get into, they just wipe the floor with the enemies and walk away, then that's not fun. Like, it might be fun the first 2 or 3 times where they just get into the combat and they decimate everything. That's fun. I think some of the best combat is where, like, it gets hairy, right? It gets tricky. Are we going to survive this? Are we not? But you don't want every combat to be, and this is something I always struggle with, you don't want every combat to be they're almost dead every time and they barely survive. I did have a DM who did tell me at one time it's not an interesting combat unless at least one player goes down to 0 hit points. And I don't necessarily think that that's a bad idea, but I wouldn't make that a hard and fast rule. On the other side of it, when my friend Pat, who I play with typically on Tuesday, ran a Storm King's Thunder campaign, it's on this channel if you want to watch it. It's very short. Anytime we asked for something, he just gave it to us. And that was fun, but then very boring. Like, all I wanted to do in one part when we were in Waterdeep was I wanted to try and steal a griffin from the Griffin Riders of Waterdeep. And we had gotten hippogriffs, and I was like, man, it'd be really cool to steal a griffin. And it was impossible for me to steal a griffin. Like, he made it that way that I would not be able to do it. But then, like, in a session later, Cloud Giants showed up and then just gave me a griffin and traded the hippogriff for the griffin for free. And I was like, man, it'd be really sweet if I could find mithril plate mail for this griffin. And he was like, oh, yeah, you can. You could just go buy it. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, anytime I suggested, like, this would be really cool if we could do this, he would just let us do whatever we wanted. And that was cool because our characters were super stacked on magic items and we were super powerful, but it was boring. Like, we didn't get to do anything fun because anytime we wanted to do something, he just let us do it. And then that made the combat and everything not interesting because we were so overpowered. He didn't understand the way experience points went, so, like, we killed somebody and we got up, like, 6 levels in one session. He's the DM, so we let him do, he controlled what we did, but, like, if you let your players get everything they want all the time without working for it, that's what I consider not balanced either, because no one's having fun. Like I said, the first time, sure, it's interesting, but eventually, like, you want everybody to have a good time and be challenged, and that's the true balance of D&D. Question: will you put me in a game? Well, I don't know you, so probably not right off the bat. My games that I run on my channel are very specific. They're with, like, groups of friends that I've known for a long time. They know that what I'm running is for them, but it's also entertainment for all of you. So I try to pick people that I know are going to be part of it. That's why I don't just have, like, an open casting call for players. That being said, if you do go over to my Patreon, I do have 2 different tiers on Patreon where you can, subscribe essentially to Patreon to be part of a patron-based game where once a month I will run a game for people. And there's also one where you can bring you and a group of 3 other people of your choice, and I'll run a game for you. And in theory, if that's how much you really want me to run a game for you, you could keep, being a patron at that tier, and I'll keep running a game for you once a month. And then you can keep your character, and we can keep going. That's the best thing I can do about, say, putting you in a game now. I just don't have the time to run other campaigns on the side. If you could create a class, what would you look like? What would that class look like and do? As I kind of stated earlier, it would be I think actually it would be a necromancer. I would just be a necromancer, and it would have 2 different ways to do it. Kind of like a minion mastery summoner based necromancer, and then maybe some sort of reaping damage based necromancer. What class should I play? Whatever you say is what I'll make for my next game, LOL. Well, then I think you should play a Grung. You should play a Grung Tempest Cleric. All right, so you deal with water and lightning, and you're a frog. I think that'd be fun. There you go. What do you think of the Mouse Guard RPG system and similarly set RPGs? I'm talking more from the perspective of the setting, but I'd like to know if you've got any interesting ideas about the system. So I'll be honest with you, I don't really know much about the Mouse Guard RPG. I know a little bit about Mouse Guard and the very high level about what it is. The concept of the system sounds really good, but I don't really have an opportunity to play a lot of games that aren't D&D. Mostly just because that's what all of you are mostly here for, and I just don't have the time, right? With 2 small kids, it's hard to play games a lot. And even before then, I have a couple of the RPGs that I've played. Maybe I'll do a top 10 in the future covering different games and systems that I like. I've never played it, but feel free to let me know in the comments. I'd love to know what you were asking about. What do I think of Pathfinder 2E and congrats? Kind of the same thing about the previous question about Mouse Guard. I don't really know. I've seen the books. The covers look nice. I recognize that Pathfinder has been around for a long time, so it kind of made sense for them to do a new edition. But from the stuff I heard they made, like, your background up tie to your ability scores, and I'm not entirely sure that that's the right way to do it. Like, if you're going to be a bartender, you get a bonus to Constitution, which is kind of forcing you to be like a gruff bartender rather than being like an intelligent bartender, whereas 5e backgrounds are kind of an agnostic thing. They give you skills, but they don't, like, mechanically impact your ability scores too much. So you can still be like a goofy criminal, or a non-charismatic charlatan if you really want to, the way things work in 5e. So I don't know. I never really got invited to play in a Pathfinder game either. I almost played in one, like, at a convention a couple times, but I never got around to it. I wanted to ask, are there any new concepts or concepts you would change in D&D, like what Treant Monk is doing with the feat system? I love your content and can't wait to see you hit 50k next. I would love to hit 50k, so thank you for that. I've been hearing a lot about Treant Monk lately. A lot of people have been telling me about that. I haven't actually checked out any of the stuff that they've done. About what they're doing with the feat system. Concepts I would change in D&D, or new concepts. As I've stated before, kind of in one of, like, my top, I have a top 10 video, top 10 things I want in 5e. I would like intelligence to be better utilized for not just wizards and like intelligence-based classes. So I'd like intelligence to give you a mechanical benefit if you have a high intelligence. In my game, I do extra languages based on intelligence, so I like that. I would love if there was a way to implement skill points in 5e. It doesn't really seem to fit anyway the way they have it currently set up. But the concept of like, even though I'm not, so like, if you're not trained, if you don't have proficiency in religion, you will only ever be as good as you are based on your intelligence modifier, unless you find a way to get proficiency in religion. In previous editions, you had points you could allocate. So yes, if you were like trained in religion, you could put more points in it. But like, in theory, I could be like a fighter, but I hung out with the cleric a bunch, and like I want to learn a little bit more about religion. So I could put points in it. I wouldn't be able to put a ton into it, but I could put some to represent my growth and learning over time about that. That's something I'd like to see in 5th edition. I'd also like to see, again, I'd like to see more feats, more racial feats. Again, the concept that I would really love to see would be a solid way to handle magic items and pricing per magic item, not just high level, spreads. What are your thoughts on magic duels in D&D or other RPGs, and do you have favorite mechanics for it? No, I never actually thought about this. I like the concept, though. I just was recently talking to someone about psionic duels in previous editions, where like you could get into a mental battle of the minds. And I like the concept of a magic duel other than just like a wizard versus another wizard slinging spells at one another. I don't really have a good system for it. If anybody does, I'd love to hear it in the comments. But I like the idea of like essentially like an arm wrestling match, but something rather than like a mage arm wrestling match where you're just basically making up rules for arm wrestling just using mage hand. But like an actual way for wizards to battle magically to resolve things without actually having to just blow each other away with fireballs. I think that would be a really cool thing to add potentially in like a future supplement from Wizards. Do you let your players start out with anything not in the normal starting equipment of the PHB, like a magic weapon or something? Yes, as I stated before, I'm not as a hard and fast rule, but I do like the concept of letting people start with something unique or creating something. I really am going to focus on my next campaign to really try to encourage my players to think outside the box for everything. Like, I usually try to stick pretty straight with the rules, but like I really kind of want to get them to the point. Like, I watch a lot of the Acquisitions Incorporated live shows, and a lot of those players just make stuff up on the spot that there is no mechanical rule for, and either Chris Perkins or Jeremy Crawford just kind of lets them do it, even though like the game doesn't really technically allow you to. And I want to try to get to be a little bit more of like on the improvisation scale, where like if someone thinks of something they want to do, I want to encourage them to do it, regardless of whether they think like the mechanics of the game allow you to. So I want to get to that point. So if someone comes up with a really cool concept for a starting item or something, I'd love to let them take it, because I don't really think there's a downside to that. I'm not a D&D player yet, but have you ever homebrewed races, classes, subclasses, or monsters? Yes, and yes. I have homebrewed races before. I actually have somebody playing one in my ongoing campaign. It's a tiefling variant. It kind of fits in the world of my game, but it's sort of an angelic. Like, I know Azamar exists, but it's like an angelic-based tiefling. There's a long history in the game about how there's now like a race war between the tieflings, that these new ones have sort of embraced this new kind of angelic heritage to get away from the sort of the demonic kind of prejudice against certain tieflings. Like, they've kind of accepted this, and then there's the more demonic tieflings who are like, they should accept us for who we are, not try to only accept the people who have kind of undergone this angelic kind of transformation. So it's like an angel tiefling. I know that's kind of a weird thing, but I've homebrewed that sub race. I mentioned a dragon board of Bahamut. I made a kind of version of that as well. As far as subclasses, I made a luck domain cleric that I made that I never really published anywhere. I made a dragon totem for the barbarian, for the totem warrior barbarian. So like you have like bear, wolf, eagle, and I made dragon as another one of that. I have homebrewed a necromancer's class, as I had mentioned before, but that like may or may not be tied up in a book that's supposed to be published that I don't know if it will or not. So if not, I will publish it, but you know, until I hear back, I can't really say anything more about that. And then monsters, yeah, I do it all the time. One of my favorite things to do is to go back into old editions of D&D and grab old monsters that were really cool that I really liked and then bring them forth into 5th edition. Do you think there are any spells that are underperforming or not very appealing? And if so, would you make a video about fixing them? I would say True Strike is the biggest one. It's the worst spell, one of the worst spells in the game. True Strike definitely needs a fix of some kind. I'm not a huge fan of Snillock's Snowball Swarm as well, just kind of like a random one off the top of my head I'm not a big fan of. Catapult's only okay. I feel like it should do half damage, not just, save or no damage. So yeah, I could do a fixing spells, or I might do in the future. Maybe I'll do specific spells that I'll fix. But yeah, definitely something I can work on. Would you ever consider playing a Rune Knight Tiefling Grappler? Not only would you get a bonus to your overall strength modifier from the Frost Rune, but you can also use, if you take defeat, the Barbed Hide Unearthed Arcana ability. Adding an extra d6 from your protruding spikes is such an awesome visual. The idea of this large Zariel demon with barbs grappling enemies is so ridiculous to me. That's a really specific build, and honestly, grappling is not that great in 5th edition. I've tried to make a grappler, and just I don't think the grappling rules really help too much in 5th edition. Also doesn't help that, like, the grappler feat kind of defeats, that's not really great, and, like, the Tavern Brawler feat's better for grappling than grappler. If you really want to go down that specific route of doing an extra d6 from the grappling damage, sure. You might want to throw in some Battle Rager Barbarian too, but that's dwarf only. That does a little bit of damage to people when you grapple them. I think it's 3 set damage if you play it as it's written in the book. I don't know. I probably would never consider playing that. I'm not really a huge fan of the fighter in general. There's not really been, I tried playing a couple different fighters throughout time. I want to play an Echo Knight. I think that could be interesting. And unless I have a really, really good, like, character concept or build, like if I was going to play, like, say, again, as I mentioned, Glen Frog as a Grung, maybe Eldritch Knight, possibly, I really wouldn't give too much try out a fighter too much. I don't think, in my mind, I like to have a lot of options and ways to think about combat and out of combat and work things out. And I don't think just like most fighters give me enough variability for me to enjoy that, which is why I like Paladins so much, because I get a lot of the fighter stuff, but I get the steed, I get the spells, I get the smites, the auras, things that will help me be more dynamic in combat while also helping the party. What is the homebrew you feel most proud of creating? It can be anything: rules, magic items, classes, subclasses. I love your content, and I'm proud to be among this passionate community we have here. Wow, well, thank you so much. The homebrew that I feel most confident about. I make a lot of magic items, right? I told you that. So I also make a lot of NPCs, right, for my party to fight. I told you about Bob Ross earlier. I told you about the Christopher Walken character earlier. I'd say, my rules, the intelligence is the bonus languages for high intelligence. I also implemented, if you wield a weapon that's two-handed, it deals 1.5 times your strength modifier in damage. I like that rule. I think that adds a little extra, oomph to strength, because strength's kind of underpowered in comparison to dex. As far as magic items, I've made a lot of really good magic items. I don't actually have it in front of me, but I made for like a one-off adventure. I made a thing called the People's Belt. I was really running with a wrestling theme. There was the People's Tournament in my previous homebrew campaign. Again, that's on the channel. You can go and find that. And it was like my sister was playing a character called Dwayna the Rock Johnson. And the 100th People's Tournament, the winner got the People's Belt, which was like, it was basically a wrestling belt that gave you a bonus, I think, to Constitution or Strength. And it basically gave you a unique ability, which was essentially the Rock's People's Elbow, where you could, like, as part of the thing, would let you do the rock bottom to slam somebody to the ground as a slam attack. And then, like, as a reaction, you could bounce back up and then drop an elbow on them and do extra damage. And I have to see if I can find the card, because it was absolutely one of the favorite items I ever designed. I thought that was really fun. I made a very early item for one of my players who was a paladin that I called the Battle Saddle. And all it was just like a saddle that you could put on on your mount, and it gave you the benefits of the mounted combatant feat, and that was something that he used for the whole game. And these are some of the early ones I ever created. Was the Gloves of Divine Healing. They were an attunement item that required attunement by a paladin. You treat your paladin level as 2 levels higher for determining how much lay on hands you have, so an extra 10 hit points. But it also let you activate your lay on hands as a bonus action, which was huge. Like, that definitely helped save the party a number of times by making lay on hands a bonus action. And I still stand by that was one of the best items I ever made. But yeah. Are there any mechanics not covered by current classes that you'd like to see developed into a class or subclass? And if so, what are they? I kind of mentioned the idea of the Necromancer and the Summoner already. A Luck Domain Cleric would be something. I think that's one that's kind of missing. I'd like to see more dragon stuff. There was a whole book, Dragonomicon, right, in older editions, and it's been in a couple of different editions. But people love dragons. It's in the name of the game. Like, give us a dragon... Oath of the Dragon, right? Or a Dragon Patron Warlock. You know, a Dragon Domain Cleric. College of Dragons, right? Give us more dragon stuff. I think that's something that I would like to see in 5th edition. How often do you hand out legendary and artifact level magic items, aka how do you use them in your game? I don't hand them out too often, but I have handed out legendary items. My players in my current game are level 13. I think one of them technically has a legendary item. I like to hand out more items, as I've stated before, that level up with the player, so they might get it early on and it's relatively weak and it grows with them. So one of them basically in my game has Storm's Herald, which is an axe, a great axe, which is basically like Stormbreaker, like Thor's axe, and it kind of has leveled up. And he's a barbarian. It's a 2-handed great axe, and it's given him an extra lightning damage on his attacks, and it's grown, and now it's letting him do he can cast like lightning bolt from it, which is something obviously a barbarian will never have access to. And I gave my one player like a ring that makes her immune to fire damage. She's a tiefling, she was already resistant. It gives her immunity to it, and it lets her like summon a hellhound as like a pet. That's like a minion to summon in battle, and that I considered legendary. But that's about it. I try not to do it. I want if I start to do it over time, I want to make sure that like at least each player has one legendary item or artifact. I don't want to have it be like one player has all of them. So slowly, and I probably would say like around like 13 or higher would be when you first start to like think about handing them out, or like start sowing the seed that these items exist, and then maybe like, or you could always do the fun thing about like letting a player like someone lend the player a legendary item or an artifact for them to use for a certain mission, and then like take it back, or you're supposed to take it back, and then you find out whether or not the players are actually honorable and will give it back. That's always a good time. What are your thoughts about the feat options? What fixing would you recommend, and what kind of new feats or rules would you like to see? You have mentioned about feats in your previous videos, and I'm curious about your latest thoughts. Many thanks and congratulations again. Thank you once again. Yeah, there are some feats that need fixing, right? Weapon Master is the classic example of an awful feat that is just there's pointless. There's no reason you should take it. There's better ways to get around it. Honestly, multi-classing is almost better to get that. So what other feats? There are definitely feats I would fix. There are some out there that I think are kind of subpar, and I've never seen anybody ever take one, like Durable. I don't think I've ever seen anybody take that feat in any of the games I've been playing in. So there's more I would fix to kind of improve them to make them more usable. Like there's the same feats pretty much. I'd say more often than not, players are always taking the same feats. They're taking Sharpshooter, Great Weapon Master. They're taking Lucky. They're taking Tough. Taking Alert or Observant. And then like maybe like the only other time people are taking other feats for the most part, in my mind, are when they need to get a +1 bonus to a given ability score. Or if they have good enough stats, maybe Elemental Attunement to get the ignore the resistance to damage. But for the most part, I'd say, and then obviously the armor-based ones. So what new feats would I want to see? I've stated it before. You know, I would like a feat. We saw sort of feats for weapons in the one Unearthed Arcana that never went anywhere. I would love to see, a cool feat so you could specialize in every weapon, where you have Sharpshooter, Crossbow Master, Crossbow Expert. We have Great Weapon Master. We have Polearm Master. I would like to see more for the other weapons, right? We have nothing. I would like to see like a hammer-based one and a flail-based one, and like, you know, other weapon types to have specific, you know, weapons. Like they were good, fell-handed and flail master or whatever. Those items, I thought those were cool. We have shield master. We have a lot of master feats, but not for every type of weapon. Right, there's nothing good if you're like you wielding a longsword. There's no weapon, there's no feat for you if you're using a longsword. We have dual wielder, right, for 2-weapon fighting. But if you're just the longsword guy, you don't have anything going for you. Or just the rapier person, you don't have a feat that lets you specialize and become better at using that weapon. So that would be something. I don't know, more feats that boost constitution or boost wisdom. There's not a whole lot of those. And I like the idea of the skill feats that we also got in the Unearthed Arcana. I'd like to see those make a comeback, so you could choose to do so and get skill proficiencies, but also get something else rather than just having to take the skilled feat. And then like I said, I would love to see like an something to do like where you reduce the to hit on a spell attack and increase the damage on the spell attack. Like if you want to take a -5 to hit on that to increase the damage by 10, like they do with Sharpshooter and Great Weapon Master. I think that would be good too. You think there should be a class focused on pets? Class focused on pets who fight for you and area control. Yes, I think there's definitely an opportunity to put something like that in game. It could be an improved version of the Beastmaster. It could be a summoning class. Shepherd Druid can arguably do that now. If you summon enough monsters or animals, you could do that by boosting them and allowing them to, you know, really the giant constrictor snakes is usually the go-to move. That helps a lot if you can summon those. You can really control the battlefield heavily with that. But yeah, a class based around it I think could definitely be fun. What is your favorite adventure source book, any version / release? I think it's got to be Dragonomicon from 3.5, because that's what I know. Right? It's a book all about dragons. It deals with dragons, giving dragons class levels, leveling up the dragons as enemies. Then it also has dragon magic item options and dragon harvesting options, dragon subclasses, feats about dragons, spells, lairs, and all sorts of cool stuff. I really like that. I also was a big fan of all the races books. They had like Races of Destiny and Races of Stone and Races of the Dragon. And they gave you different, like a whole book that covered like 3 or 4 races. And it just gave you massive history and lore about them, and then unique options just for them as well. Things I'd love to see in 5e. How do you come up with characters to play? And if it changes, what are some of the ways you came up for the idea of your favorite / least favorite character? So that is interesting. I, unlike a lot of people, I don't think it's any secret here that I like building characters, but I'm also not like a person who's like, oh my god, min-maxing is the worst. I like building effective characters. If I'm going to play a character in a game, I want them to be good. I want them to be good at what they do, and I want them to be effective. I think I can play a character very interesting regardless of what their stats and abilities are, but I want to have fun with the character, and I personally have fun playing powerful characters or characters that are optimized. That's not saying that I can't play an interesting character that's also optimized, because I can, and I usually do. So how do I come up with a character? It typically depends on, like, I usually have like a running list of character concepts. So when that first character I mentioned, Larenthier, I was reading through all the classes in the player's handbook, and I read the Paladin, and I absolutely fell in love with the way the Paladin worked. And I looked at it and I said, okay, well, what race works well with Paladin? Oh, well, Half-Elf does, right? Because it gets all the ability scores that match. And I rolled really good stats. So I was like, I'm going to build a Half-Elf Paladin. And then I was like, well, what kind of Paladin am I going to be? And I was like, I think I'm going to go Oath of the Ancients, because I really liked Rangers and Druids in 3.5, and I wasn't really crazy about the Druid or the Ranger in 5e, but in Oath of the Ancients, Paladin is kind of rangery, so I could go that way, and that was kind of what I went with. And then I built the whole backstory around who he was and why he loved nature and all that stuff. So more often than not with me, I start with a character base, and then I build the background. I know a lot of people start where they'll think about the background for their character, and then they'll make a character to fit it. I usually design the character first, mechanically, and then I build the background into it. So for Axton, that one character I told you about, the cleric fighter, I had decided I wanted to be. I looked at what the party. Oh, another thing I typically do is more often than not, I wait, and I usually be the last person to pick a character, because I get to run a lot of D&D. I don't get to play too much, but I like to fill in the roles that the party needs. right? So like I know a lot of people for whatever reason don't seem to enjoy playing healers in games in general, whether it be MMOs or not. So I usually will take the role of the healer, or I'll take the role of whatever the party needs. So if I see that we have a heavy AoE character, we have a heavy single target creature, damage dealer, right? So we've got a rogue, a paladin, and a druid. Well, we could probably use somebody who can heal, so I'll play a cleric. Or, we have somebody that's really good at ranged damage, AoE, and single target damage or skills. We really need somebody to tank. I'll play the tank. That's typically how I design it. I very rarely get to make a game, like make a character for a game where I sit down and I'm the first one to design the character and I actually get to play what I'll tell you this thing. I've been saying it for a long time. I've never gotten a chance to play a rogue in any game. Every time I sit down and I'm like, I'm going to get to, from 3.5 to now, every time I try to sit down to play a rogue, somebody always plays a rogue, and I don't want to be the second rogue in the party. That game I was telling you about with the cleric, I originally wanted to sit down in that game and play a rogue, but I found out somebody already was. So I decided to play a cleric instead. We were going to do like a one-shot over there in the next door when Celine was going to run a game, and I was like, awesome. And then one of the guys was just like, I'll be a rogue. And I was like, well, there goes my chance at playing a rogue. I'm playing in the Rod of Seven Parts. The only character who was decided before we started the game was someone was going to play a rogue. So I've never gotten a chance to play a rogue, so that would be something I'd like to do. I really want to play a scout rogue, because I think it's the closest thing I can play to an effective ranger at the moment. But yeah, when I design, when I go to make a character, I usually start with a character class, race concept, maybe even magic item or feat design for that character first, and then I build a backstory to fit it. In my evil campaign, for example, I'm playing a Tiefling Whispers Bard, and I wanted to do that because I know that a Whispers Bard is not a great bard for a typical campaign, because all of your benefit stuff for your Bardic Inspiration is to use it for damage rather than using it for the party, and more often than not, in a good themed party, you'd be using your inspiration to help your fellow teammates out, but in an evil campaign, it works out great. The only other one I didn't really get to decide on is in our Out of the Abyss campaign, I played a goblin monk. And I wanted to play a monk, and I rolled on we decided to roll on a random table to determine what our races were. I rolled goblin, it was new at the time. And then I decided to play monk in the new Unearthed Arcana Tranquility Monk had come out. So I decided to play that because I could be a monk with healing, and the party didn't really have that. Why are there no glaive magic items? Why are there no so many magic items is my question. I completely agree with you. There are, like, the only way you can get a glaive magic item is like a +1, +2, +3 glaive, or like a glaive of warning or a vicious glaive. And that is my problem with 5th edition. There are so many sword type items, but there are very few other type items, and that bothers me greatly. I think we should have more items of more different types. That would be something else I would include in my own book, is magic items of a variety of different types of weapon, as well as armor. So you can have multiple options and things to strive for as your character. When are you going to start fixing bad spells? Soon. It'll be on my list. I know I let my patrons on Patreon vote what my next topics are going to be. So I try to have them help me out on that so I can alleviate some of the decision paralysis on my end of what to choose, because I have a big long list. So if you want to jump in, that's a thing that even the lowest tier gets to help vote on what videos I make. So maybe you can help out there. Please do a ranking videos on each class's subclasses, worst to best. I can definitely do that. It's unfortunate that some have so few options and some have so many. And then obviously it'll eventually be outdated as more are released. But I thought it could be really funny to make a joke and call it Ted's Declassified D&D Class Guide, something like that. Maybe I'll do that in the future. How would I build an Echo Knight? When I typically think of a fighter, I immediately think of a heavy armor character, but this might be the first time I decide to build a dexterity-based Echo Knight. I think I really want to just go real hard into the Naruto side of things. I guess, or JoJo, people tell me. I've never watched JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Sorry, guys, I haven't just got around to it. But yeah, I think I would probably build a dexterity-based Echo Knight and really go heavy into the Shadow Clone. Maybe be like a an Echo Knight monk or an Echo Knight rogue, and then use that to kind of build like my own Naruto ninja. Ted, you are immortal. You just look so tired. Is this the price for forever life? No, it's the price of working 8, or really now it's like 7:30 to 5 o'clock every day, Monday through Friday, for a essential job that I can't get away from, while also working from home, doing that now while my wife also works, while we both don't have daycare. So it's the two of us working from home for both of our jobs that are essential, while also having a 7-month-old and a 3-year-old running around or starting to crawl now, which why he picked the worst time to start to crawl. While trying to do that all during the week, Monday through Friday, while also trying to record these videos for you guys, streaming on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, and still trying to do like housework and prep for games and write videos and things like that. I don't really write videos, but like design videos and things like that. That's what this looks like right here. This crazy hair and the disheveledness and stuff. That's someone who wants to continually put out videos to keep you entertained while you guys are all stuck in your house dealing with what's going on in the world. I'm able to work, so I'm very thankful for that, but I need to do that with everything else going on, so I try to do that, but also entertaining all of you, and that's why I always look so tired, because even on the regular, when I wasn't doing all this while also working from home, I have to record after my kids go to bed or during nap time, so like, I don't even start sitting down at my computer typically to record till like 10 o'clock. And then like sometimes I'll go down a YouTube rabbit hole or get distracted by something else. And then like now I'm sitting down, I'm recording this right now. It's 2:47 in the morning as I'm recording this question. So yeah, I'm tired. Have you made any completely homebrew classes? Yes, I made a necromancer class. Hopefully I'll be able to release it soon. I'll talk to the publisher and see. If they're not going to release it, I'll put it out on the DMs Guild. What does the future of Nerd Immersion look like to you? Where do you want to take the channel? That's a really good question. I didn't ever think I'd actually be at this point. I just want to keep growing the channel because I want to keep providing people content and to my opinion on Dungeons and Dragons. Like I said, I don't ever anticipate this becoming my full-time job. If it did, that would be interesting, but I feel like at some point when things become your job, then things are going to change, right? I feel like they have to if it becomes your full-time job. On a selfish level, I wouldn't mind if the channel grew big enough where like more people, like I get reached out to by folks for collaborations on things. I'm not saying like that. I don't want to be in like WotC's back pocket where I'm doing stuff for them all the time. While doing anything specific for Wizards of the Coast could be fun. But like I'd like to get big enough where I could use Nerd Immersion to help other people out too. Like, I can host charity streams and raise money for charity. I could do collaborations with people that I really like on YouTube, right? People that I watch. Even if I don't watch them for like D&D, like video game YouTubers or like vlogging YouTubers, I would love to like reach out to them and be like, hey, I'm Nerd Immersion, and like I have a little bit of clout behind me because the channel's grown a little bit, and I can be like, maybe we could do a collab. 2 examples for you. Zero Wandering, Zero from the Smash Brothers community. I really love his videos, and I really respect his Smash Brothers game and his whole history of being the best in the world at Smash and then just quitting to go for like YouTube and content creation. He seems like just a super chill, really happy-go-lucky dude, and I would love to do a collaboration with him on something. He doesn't seem to play D&D, and I play Smash, but I'm not great at Smash Brothers. I'm pretty good. Like, I'm locally good against, like, my friends in my basement, but I'm not, like, tournament good. And I would love to do a collaboration with him, where, like, I play D&D with him, like, I run a game for him and maybe some other people, and then I get, like, absolutely destroyed at Smash while playing with him, and I think that would be really fun. Another person I really like is Steve Ramsey from Woodworking for Mere Mortals. For those of you who don't know, I love home improvement projects and woodworking, like the desk that I'm sitting on, all of the furniture that you see in the background over here. I built all of that furniture myself. I'm pretty handy. I've been doing a lot of home renovation projects and that kind of stuff. I told you I built the Proton pack. I like doing that stuff. and he makes wood. He does woodworking projects, and I just found out in one of his vlog videos during the quarantine that his son writes like D&D modules, not like professionally, but like he runs D&D. And like that would be a really cool collaboration for me to like work with the guy who owns the YouTube channel and his son to like do some sort of collaboration project. So on like a selfish level, that's a thing I would like to do. But also things I'd like to take the channel to in the future. I'd like to grow big enough that I could like bring people on board and like pay my players consistently and like maybe hire an editor so I don't have to do all the editing. That would be nice. Things that will take some of the load off of me to allow me to make more content for you. But you know what? If things stay where they are, I'm fine with that too. The growth has been amazing, and meeting so many people and chatting, having the community that I have both here on YouTube and in Discord is really great. The fact that like now when I stream for people, when I stream on Twitch, like there's actual people in the audience and there's a chat going, that's really cool. I love if the Twitch grew a little bit too, so we could have more people, not even for me, like for any reason for the channel, just so there's more people in the chat actively talking. And one last thing, I'd love to get to a point where like the games like that, this is the Nerd Immersion has grown big enough where people like submit fan art of some of the stuff that I've done in the games, and that to me is when you've made it with like a stream, when people start making fan art of like the characters and the moments, because there's been a lot of really awesome character moments in some of the games that I've ran, like the really fun, really awesome. And I would love to see that animated or drawn into a picture format or something like that. And I'm not artistic in that way, and none of my friends are really super good. I mean, I do have let me rephrase that. I do have some friends that are very excellent artists, but like they're busy doing other things, and like, you know, it's not, I'm not commissioning art. It's just like something where someone liked what I did so much, or like the content or the things that I made so much, that they like decided that they wanted to emulate that in an art form, and that would be something really cool to me. That, like I said, is when you've ultimately made it with the games that you're running, when someone decides they want to create fan art for it. But yeah, I would just like the channel to continue to grow and to be able to help use my channel to boost people up, introduce new people to D&D, to do more reviews. And again, I do DM's Guild reviews. Like I don't do them as frequently as I'd like to. But the fact that, like, if Nerd Immersion does a review of, like, you reach out to me and say, hey, I'm going to publish this thing on the DM's Guild, will you review it? And I do, and then me reviewing it helps you immensely because Nerd Immersion reviewed it, and then, like, that gives you a boost. And that's the kind of stuff that I really want to do with the channel. What is the one subclass that I would want to create? Oath of the Dragon Paladin. I told you before, I love paladins, and I want more dragon stuff. I want a dragon-based paladin subclass. What campaign module are you interested in running / playing in that you have not yet? Well, I want to really do, it's tricky, right? I don't think I want to do anything, Wild Mouse, just like starter adventures. I've played through a lot of them. I think I'd get bored of all like the intense dungeonness of Dungeon of the Mad Mage. I know not every level is a true dungeon. And everybody's doing Descent into Reverse, so I think I'd want to do Acquisitions Incorporated, because I love Ac Inc. and the Penny Arcade guys, and I've met a handful of them a couple of times, and they're really cool people. So I would really love to play in an Acquisitions Incorporated game. I think that could be really fun. Another name-based question. What's your opinion on the name Matt? I have a really good friend, my neighbor growing up. He was Matt. We called him Matty. He's a really good friend of mine. I miss him. I haven't seen him in a long time. So, yeah, I'm good with the name Matt. I have a question I'd love you to answer, or rather a topic to maybe discuss, or maybe a video idea. Unsure how to designate it. Can you explain how to find games online? The sites recommended are not intuitive, and I'm looking to start a long-term campaign with a group of folks, hopefully not a TPK, but 1 to 20, and I do not know how to go about it online. Cheers and love the channel. I'm going to reach out to all of you, crowdsource this one out, because I don't really get, as I state, I don't get to play in too many games. I definitely don't get to play on like random ones online. Most of mine are curated ones for content purposes, or ones that I'm running in person. So I don't really get to do like the, hey, I'm looking for a game, just get me into one. Obviously, I say that, like I would love to play my frog character and I would love to play a rogue. Not the same character, but you know, those opportunities don't come around too often. So how would you get into a game? The best thing I can suggest to you is to I see people like randomly post on the D&D 5e like Facebook group like, hey, looking for a game, and people say sure. I don't know if those go anywhere. And part of the problem I think a lot of the time is you don't know what you're getting into when like so I would say session 0, right, is super important in any of these online games where you're starting from the ground up and you don't know everybody you're playing with. You need to set the ground rules early. Super important. I guess the best I can say is check out our Discord. There's a link in the description to my Discord. We do have a looking for group and a looking for player section on there. I have seen a bunch of people have been posting and potentially starting games. I haven't heard too much of what's been going on with those. So if you are one of the folks in our Discord and you are playing in games and they've worked together that you've organized through my Discord, let me know in the comments or hit me up on Discord and tell me how well or poorly your game is going. But that's the best I can offer you at the moment. I don't really know, outside of like looking for group on Roll20 and other sites like that, how best to find a game. I don't know. Are your homebrew options available on D&D Beyond? I can't find it with the built-in search. So I assume you're talking about like my races and stuff like, or not my races, but my classes. And no, and I'll show you why. So here I am on D&D Beyond. Here's my Phoenix Sorcerer fix that I made. So this is got the updated Phoenix Sorcerer, but it also, because there's no way to update the base class, I told you in my Fixing Sorcerer 2.0 video, I added the thing with Bloodline Recovery, where a sorcerer can once per long rest regain half their sorcery points on a short rest, similar to a wizard's arcane recovery. So I did that. Here's my updated Ignite, Mantle of Flame, Phoenix Spark, but I had to add in at second level Phoenix Recovery, right? The ability to add that in. I had to add in the new spells per level that I wanted to add, the additional origin spells. And then here's Nourishing Fire and Form of the Phoenix. But it says right here at the top, this homebrew subclass does not have the necessary class features required with the correct required levels. So I don't know what that means. It's a subclass, right? So it's just telling me like I have everything at 1, I have it at 6, I have it at 14 and 18, but I guess maybe because I added in this extra second level thing, it's not letting me publish it. I don't know. And then I took the Battle Rager updates that we had made in the Battle Rager video and updated that, named it here, but it says Path of the Spine Ravager is currently too similar to Path of the Battle Rager to share with the community. So you can see it's all in here, and I guess I could change the names of some of these things, but I don't know what's going to change it. All I'm trying to do is take the existing subclass that you made poorly and fix it. I want to keep the main class there while it's there, but it's too close to the existing one, so they won't let me publish it. So that's why you'll see some magic items and stuff. If you search under, if you go here and go to browse, you have to look under specific things. So let's go to browse magic items, right? And if you search, where is that? If you search advanced filters and you search by author and you type in Nerd Immersion, with no space. You type in Nerd Immersion, maybe Nerd Immersion. Spell it right. Maybe. Can we do that? Will that work? Yeah. So this will be. Oh no, it won't. It doesn't do it at all. I don't know why it doesn't let you choose me as the creator. The user must be selected in this field. Nerd Immersion. I don't know why it's not letting you search me in there. But oh, here it is. Nerd Immersion. Filter. So here you can see the magic items that I've made. They list them here. So the magic items that I've made are listed here, the ones that are published. If there's anything else, that's the best way you can look to see to search things that I've made. But yeah, there you go. That's why my homebrew classes and things aren't on D&D Beyond, because they won't let me publish them. If I could pick the next setting release, which would it be? Ravenloft. I want a true Ravenloft campaign setting. I don't want Curse of Strahd, which has some setting stuff, but only covers a very small section of it. I want like what we got for Eberron, but I want it for or like a really good version of the Forgotten Realms would be nice rather than just the Sword Coast Adventures Guide. But really just a good deep lore Ravenloft setting would be ideal for me. Not just an adventure like Curse of Strahd is with a little bit of lore. I want the whole setting. How have I been? Thank you for asking. A lot of people ask me questions. Not many people ask you, how are you? I'm good. I'm tired. I'm actually okay though, right? Things have been okay. Family's good. Family's safe. Still have a job. Still working. Even more so, like I said, than normal. So I'm very thankful for that. Kids are good. I do miss having daycare because it does. To get a little personal here, I do worry because like at daycare, right, my kids are socialized with other kids and they're doing activities and things like that. And I can't really like sit down to do like crafts and activities with them because I need to be on my computer on conference calls and working, as does my wife. So we're sort of balancing the working from home / trying to keep the kids engaged and like not just turning on the TV or turning on a tablet and like using that as a babysitter. But it's hard to do both because we're expected to be working, but also expected to be, full-time parents because it's not like we can hire a babysitter or anything. And, none of my family is really around or her family is really around. So we're kind of stuck doing both. I tell you one thing, I do feel more like an adult now, though, that I have to watch a kid and also work at the same time. I still felt like the young kid me while I was like going to work and then like picking the kids up from daycare. And then like I got them for 2 hours before they go to sleep, except on the weekends. Now that I'm with them every minute of every day, I definitely feel more like an adult. I do feel out of shape though, and I know I am, so I'd like to change that. So thank you for asking. Do I prefer playing official Wizards of the Coast adventures and settings or homebrew worlds and homebrew adventures? I don't really enjoy playing pre-written campaigns from my experience with having played and ran pre-written campaigns. Even when I do, I heavily modify them to suit my own needs. I don't have any problem playing within a Wizards of the Coast setting, right? Like whether it be Greyhawk or Forgotten Realms or Eberron or whatever. I don't have any problem playing in those games, but I prefer homebrew settings because, like, in theory, the DM has more interest in it because they've created the world or like the story that you're going to be playing in. So I'd say a really good example would be my Rod of Seven Parts campaign that I play and stream on Wednesday nights. It is Rod of Seven Parts is an old 2e Greyhawk adventure, I believe, that my friend Jordan put into 5th edition and set in the Forgotten Realms. So the module sort of exists, but it wasn't set in Forgotten Realms, and now it is, and it's sort of like a homebrew version of that module. So that's good. That's like an adaptation of something to make it kind of current, and that I'm enjoying. But like, one of the favorite games I ran was, again, my Know Your Role campaign that I've talked about here on the channel, or in this video that's on this channel. It started off as Lost Mines of Phandelver, and then it springboarded into its own campaign beyond there. And I really, really enjoyed that. And I think that's one of the best games one of the best campaigns I've ran. And I really, really like Jake's Evil campaign that we play every so often, because the Evil campaign is set in the Forgotten Realms, but it's a homebrew game that Jake made up. What is your favorite level 20 character build, multi-classing feats, official content, and WotC UA is allowed? I'm probably gonna be lame here, guys, and say level 20 Oath of the Ancients Paladin Half-Elf. I just love it. I mean, it's hard. See, I feel like it's tricky when you're gonna do like a level 20 builds. It's very different when you're playing the game than when you're building at level 20. Right, so when you're playing through the campaign, you learn a lot about your character, and you learn about what your party's lacking, what your character's lacking, and things you wish you had as you level up. Like I told you about Larenthir, my paladin, who eventually multiclassed into Bard. I was very thankful to have Healing Word as a healing spell. I was thankful to have the extra 4 subclasses I got, 4 subclasses, 4 skills that I got from multiclassing into Bard and then taking a Lore Bard. I got 4 extra skill proficiencies. On top of being a half-elf and having 2 extra there, I was very good at skills, and I had Jack of all trades, and that was really useful to the party. I also was a paladin, so I didn't have really any AoE, but now I had access to Thunderwave and Shatter, so that helped. But I think it's very different if you're building a character at 20th level when you start at 20 than when you're leveling up to get to 20. I feel like multi-classing happens more when you're leveling up than less when you're building at 20. So if I was going to build a 20th level character, either for a campaign or just for fun, I'd probably build a level 20 half-elf Oath of the Ancients Paladin. If I was going to do feats, it depends on really the stats, right? If my ability scores, I'd want to have a 20 charisma more than anything for the extra bonus to my saving throws from my aura. I'd want to have a very high strength. I'd probably be rocking plate mail. Ideally, Mizium plate mail if possible, but if we're not doing with Ravnica stuff, I would do adamantine plate mail. I'd probably take the Shield Master feat if I could swing it the Alert feat as well. So I'd take Resilient Constitution so that I could have proficiency in Constitution saving throws. Between that and my high charisma, I would likely not fail any Constitution saving throws. I'd get a Necklace of Prayer Beads, as that's my go-to item for a Paladin. And then if I had in level 20 a Holy Avenger, right, that would be the other one. And that would be kind of my deal. Maybe a good shield, too, maybe like a Spell Guard, shield, adamantine or Mizium plate mail, a Holy Avenger longsword, and a Necklace of Prayer Beads. That'd probably be my level 20 build. What is your favorite class for your players to play as a dungeon master? Well, I often say I prefer divine characters both as a player and as a DM because it's always, I think, divine-based characters really give you, like a paladin or a cleric, they give you that avenue, right, where you can always, if you need to direct the party in some way, if you want to try to engage the party or challenge them, you can receive the prayer, the vision, the message from your god, something like that. But something that I really like and no one's ever done it is I'm an archer in real life. I've talked about it in the past. There was a point where I was almost going Olympic as an archer when I was much, much younger. So I know bows. I shoot bows very well. I go hunting all the time, and I'm a good target shooter. And I love bows, right? And that's why I used to love Ranger. Legolas is my favorite character in Lord of the Rings. I usually play archers in a lot of games, and that's why I loved Ranger and elves specifically in D&D because they always get bow proficiency. And none of my players in any of the games I've ever ran have played an archer, except for maybe one for a very short-lived character. But I love designing like magic bows and custom arrowheads and all sorts of cool things like that to make the archer really shine and have cool options. And no one ever plays an archer, so I never get to do that. So I would really love in some game for someone to play an archer so I can make them cool stuff. How did I meet my best D&D group or groups? Well, the group I play with every Tuesday night, I known Sean, who I play with. I've known him since we were like 4 years old. So that's 29 years at this point. We went to preschool together. He introduced us to Celine, who is now his girlfriend. He knew her older sister, and that's how I met her. I met Jake, who I play with often on Tuesday. I met him at a random like Wednesday night Adventure League game at a game store, and he brought his friend Pat to the game store, so I met Pat that way. And then we kind of all over time invited all of them together, and that's how we have our Tuesday group. And then probably one of the other best online groups that I've had would have been my Rise of Tiamat Horde of the Dragon Queen group. And that was my friend Katie and Laura, who are cousins who I met through a Discord based text like a game a long time ago, and I invited them to play. I met my good friend Celeste Conowitch of the Venture Maidens at Gen Con. I invited her to play. And then the following Gen Con, Celeste introduced me to Renee Rhodes from Fate and the Fable Maidens, and then I invited Renee to play. And that's that group. And then the other group I would say is like my Wednesday group that I play with Ferrado 7 Parts. I met Jordan at Gen Con, and we became pretty good friends, and we filmed some stuff together. He invited me to a game, and he said he was looking to add some people. He wanted to add his friend LB, who I didn't know who he invited. We both know Lex from Dank Dungeons, so he invited him, and I invited my good friend Brenna, who I know from doing interviews and other things with the gaming companies that she's worked with. So in those instances, those latter ones, those are tricky. My online groups are people that like because I'm in like the D&D space, I know and have met people. So that's how I got those groups. But my group that I've had for longer than I've known any of those folks was my best friend from preschool, a girl that he knew, and two guys that I met at random at a game store on a random whim Wednesday night Adventure League game. If you had the final say at Wizards of the Coast, which Unearthed Arcana would be top priority for release? Alternative class features, 100%. Make those public, make those published. Let people get alternative builds and other ways, add new spells, expanded spells lists, and other options to all their characters. But add in something to fix Counter Charm for the bards, please. What is my least favorite setting? Probably Ravnica, I guess. Just because I have no interest in it, because I'm not really big on Magic the Gathering. So out of the ones that have been released so far, it'd probably be Ravnica. I don't have anything. I don't know anything about Dragonlance really. I know very little about Dragonlance. So that's the one I know the least about. So it's not my least favorite setting. It's just the one I know the least about. Out of all the characters you've made, who would be the best drinking buddy? That is a great question. So I guess it really depends on what kind of game I'm trying to play. I'd say probably Larenthier, my half-elf paladin that I mentioned before. He was a pretty chill dude. He was very relaxed. He had a very Finn from Adventure vibe, from Adventure Time vibe. If Finn was a true paladin in a Dungeons and Dragons setting who lived in the woods and his best friend was a bear instead of a dog. And, obviously it was a little bit more brutal and a little less lawful good and a little more chaotic good. So I think he'd be a good drinking buddy. Plus, like, in theory, his aura would protect me from, help out with the drinking for the Constitution saves. So that would be a benefit. So I'd say he'd probably be the best. What's your favorite third-party / homebrew content for 5th edition? That's brutal. When you're like me and I see hundreds of... every week I see hundreds of different homebrew and third-party stuff through the DM's Guild. But I'd say my favorites are probably going to be, at least creator-wise, like company-wise, I'd say is Cobalt Press and Jetpack 7. I've been a big fan of Cobalt Press. I'd say the ones I probably use the most would be like Tome of Beasts and Creature Codex, which are both Cobalt Press. So I probably use those the most. But I also really like Jetpack 7's content, and they've been really nice to me to help out with giveaways and stuff. So I'm a big fan of like the Legendary Dragon supplement. I like a lot. But if I was going to go with a specific one on the DM's Guild, it would be the Armorer's Handbook, Equipment Upgrade and Rune System for 5e from Heavy Arms. I did a review on it on my channel. It's on the DM's Guild. I'll put a link in the description. But it's a best mithril seller on there. It's one of the best, equipment-based books out there, and I would highly, highly recommend you check it out. You get to DM a 4-player one-shot. You can pick any 4 people, alive, dead, or imaginary. We'll pretend everyone already knows how to play Dungeons and Dragons. Who would you pick and why? Oh boy, that is something. Right, that is a tough question. Oh man, who would I want to DM a game for? That is so tricky. Like immediately I start thinking about like dead people, like who would I want to bring back to get a chance to play DM a game for? I would want to do so 4 people, right? I have Bruce Campbell from Army of Darkness / Evil Dead, just because I love him as an actor and he's hilarious. And I think he'd be just like that much over the top in a Dungeons and Dragons setting. I think that would be really fun. I think Chris Perkins, I'd love to try to get him in a game where I get to run the game for him. Because I would like to see how he takes it and how good he's adapting at like not dealing with like he writes for the game and this is a game that he's going to play. Plus, he always seems to make kooky characters in any situation I've ever seen him play a character in. Bruce Campbell, Chris Perkins. Realistically, my good friend Nick, who got me started in Dungeons and Dragons, I've never gotten a chance to run a D&D game for him, the one I talked about back in the first question. So Nick, my good friend Nick, I'd like to have him in that game. And who else? Who would be a good person to run a game for? And I'm like looking around, see like if there's anything that jumps out at me. I see a lot of Ghostbusters and Ninja Turtle stuff, but Dan Aykroyd would be he'd be really super into it. Um, you know what? No, I think Jerry Holkins, from Penny Arcade. I met the guy a bunch in person, and he just nerded out so hard over his own D&D book, the Acquisitions Incorporated book, and just that level of passion is just like, I don't know. I like the fact that like I literally sat there for like a half an hour and we flipped through his book long before it came out, and he just nerded out the whole time. And I think it would be really fun to run a game with Chris Perkins and Jerry Holkins at the same table, but then like also toss in like my friend who knows none of these people and like is just a good friend of mine, and then also Bruce Campbell. It'd just be a wild session. Man, I'd love to run that. And like they all are still alive, so it could be really fun. I think that would be a really good time. All right, here's a good one. Bang, marry, kill each of the classes in 5th edition. All the real published ones, no homebrew. That's tricky. All right. Let's see. We'll start alphabetically here, so we'll start with Barbarian. I guess we'll start with Artificer. That's the top of the list. Kill Artificer. Don't need it. The problem is there's so many classes, so you can't really do like the bang, marry, kill because you have to do each individual one. But we'll try. So kill the Artificer. Bang the Barbarian, I guess. Bang the Bard. Marry the Cleric. Kill the Druid. Kill the Fighter. Bang the Monk. Marry the Paladin. Kill the Ranger. Bang the Rogue. Kill the Sorcerer. Kill the Warlock. Marry the Wizard. And believe it or not, folks, we are here at our last question. How do you manage a current campaign when a bunch of new content is released? Specifically when the content may help a current player. That is tricky, right? Because let's say you start running a campaign, you're 3 or 4 sessions in, and the next week, the next source book is released, and it drastically changes the options for the characters. You know, it really depends, right? On the game and the players involved. I'm perfectly okay with just being like, hey, did you guys see that this new book came out? Some pretty good options for paladins in here, pretty good options for rogues, some new spells. And then I'll just say like, hey, this is a blanket chance. Anybody want to change anything for their character, right? You want to swap your spells around, we got new spell options. You want to change your subclass, go ahead. And like, just I don't think it needs to have a world ending, like we need to explain this in narrative, why your subclass changed from a death domain cleric to an arcana domain cleric. I say that example specifically because that happened in my Know Your Role campaign that I was telling you about. We started playing, and one of the players was a death domain cleric from the Dungeon Master's Guide, and the Sword Coast Adventurers Guide came out, and they wanted to switch to the arcana domain cleric, so I just let them switch. It wasn't like a huge deal. It's fine. And then like if there's new spells and you have to choose spells known, like obviously I'll just let you swap. Things are a little tricky if it's new races. You could explain it away though, right? You could have something like, you know, there's some weird magic surge happens in the world and everything changes, and then maybe that gives you an option for changing other parts of the campaign that you want to switch or swap out to make things a little bit different for the players. But it's ultimately up to you, right? If you don't want to let them use that, or you want to let them end that character and start a new character, or maybe you want to start a whole new campaign. It really all depends on the situation and how the players are going to handle it, and you will know that better than I would. I did have one 3-5 session or campaign that I ran, where it seemed like every time we sat down to play, one of the characters was always asking me to change something about their character. They wanted to change the class, the feat they took, whatever. And I did let that go for a while. I was like, okay, sure, you can change it. And what I did was I said like, hey, he's changing this thing about his character. This is an option for any of you to change anything about your character, anything you want to change. No? Okay, moving on. And then if he said it, changing it again, I'd say, okay, he's changing something about his character again. Last chance. You guys want to change anything about it? And then eventually I was like, all right, you're done. This is the last chance. No more changes. I can't keep dealing with you swapping everything around. Because it delays the campaign every time when you show up to play, and then we have to redo your character every time. So again, you would know that better than I would. So I would say look to your players, see what happens. And ultimately, right now, we don't have anything new coming out for a while. So if you start a campaign now, you may not have to worry about it, at least till the fall. And that is it, folks. I am clocking out here at 3:25 in the morning, having recorded I don't know how much footage of all 73 specific questions answered, although some, like I said, were duplicate. Thank you all so much for helping me get to here where I am at 30K. We're actually approaching 31K. We might even be there soon. I really, really appreciate all of you for coming along with this journey with me, and I hope that we all get to see what's going to happen if I hit 50K by my birthday. And like I said, if I manage to pull that, my birthday is July 12th, by the way, in case anybody's wondering. If I can hit 50K by then, I'll just be floored. And the stuff I'm going to give away, I'll give away books and stuff, but I'm going to give away a lot more too. I think I might give away like running some games for people as part of the giveaway. Like I'll run a game for you and your friends for a little while. That could be fun. Stuff like that. I'm very excited. Also, it's kind of come up a little bit, but I think I may potentially open up a P.O. box in case anybody's interested in sending stuff this way. I don't anticipate anybody doing that. But people have asked if there's a way like they can send stuff or like buy stuff off an Amazon wish list. I never thought that would be something people would be interested in, but I guess I can put a link to my wish list in the description. And if I open up a P.O. box, you guys can ship stuff this way if you really, really want to. That's up to you. So thank you all so much for watching. Once again, a shout out to the couple of folks on Patreon who asked questions specifically. And once again, as a reminder, I do monthly Q&As with my patrons. So if you want more one-on-one time with me to ask your own specific questions, that's the best way to do it. I don't think I need to say this as this is a 30K video, but if you wouldn't mind subscribing to the channel and ringing that notification bell, I would appreciate it. Also double check, because apparently YouTube unsubscribes people from people. So make sure you haven't been unsubscribed to my channel in case you want to be subscribed again. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you next time.